слава козацькая, де на папері писана, лісами, гаями, байраками, вона заколисана. Слава козацькая, де на папері писана, лісами, гаями, байраками, вона заколисана. Наша
Казала в понеділок, підем разом по барвінок. Я прийшов, тебе нема, підманула, підвела. Ти ж мене підманула, ти ж мене підвела. Ти ж мене молодого з ума розвела. Ти казала у вівторок, поцілуєш разів 40. Я прийшов, тебе нема, підманула, підвела. Ти ж мене підманула, ти ж мене підвела. Ти ж мене молодого з ума розвела. Ти казала у середу, підем разом по череду. Я прийшов, тебе нема, підманула, підвела. Ти ж мене підманула, ти ж мене підвела. Ти ж мене молодого з ума розвела. Ти казала у четвер, підем разом на концерт. Я прийшов, тебе нема, підманула, підвела. Ти ж мене підманула, ти ж мене підвела. Ти ж мене молодого з ума розвела. Ти казала у п'ятницю, підем разом по суниці. Я прийшов, тебе нема, підманула, підвела. Ти ж мене підманула, ти ж мене підвела. Ти ж мене молодого з ума розвела. Ти казала у суботу, підем разом на роботу. Я прийшов, тебе нема, підманула, підвела. Ти ж мене підманула, ти ж мене підвела. Ти ж мене молодого з ума розвела. Ти казала у неділю, підем разом на весілля. Я прийшов, тебе нема, підманула, підвела. Ти ж мене підманула, ти ж мене підвела. Ти ж мене молодого з ума розвела. Я ж тебе підманула, я ж тебе підвела. Я ж тебе молодого з ума розвела.
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптям посорбати довбані щі, та трохи в ущах перегрівся навар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Зі сходу припхались до нас барани, для вас становлення великої страни, найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Їх доводи, всяке озброєння, різне, ракети, потужні машини залізні. У нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, і ми зачаїли на орків образу. З бандитів російських робить примар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, на вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить. Хто ж винен, що в нашому полі глухар? Байрактар. Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає їх цар.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, everybody, once again, and welcome back to day 113 of the news.
And of course, like Matthew said, it is day 113 of the news. We only have one more week's worth of time to go until we reach the very end of the fourth month and enter the fifth month of the war. And surprisingly, the Ukrainians are still holding their ground and giving the Russians a run for their money. I've said that multiple times, and it just stands true each and every time. The Russians are getting a run for their money here in this war, and the Ukrainians are certainly showing that the Russians are not the power that they were to be believed as earlier on, just a few years ago. Of course, we have some pretty interesting news today, and also, I'm going to touch on that thumbnail real quick in the title. I said that Ukraine fights for every inch, and also the thumbnail says not one step back, and as of today, once again, the Russians have managed to take no new ground, as of today, and it pretty much stands true that the Ukrainians are not stepping back an inch or giving up a single yard of ground right now. The Ukrainians have been holding the entirety of the line for what feels like a month in most areas, and we can now see in the Severodonetsk area that may have solidified as a very strategic resource was hit inside of Luhansk today. And of course, we'll circle back to that and cover that here in a little bit. But let's get into our schedule for tonight and let's see what we got. Starting off in Kyiv, we're going to be covering two bits of news there that are pretty interesting. Of course, a little bit international, actually. And we've seen a pretty popular face, at least in international news, arrive in Kyiv today and speak to President Zelensky. We'll then be moving out of Kyiv, and then we'll be moving into Russia, to Moscow. We'll, of course, cover the two bits of news there, and then we'll move back down to the location unknowns. And I am happy to say this. This is something I'm incredibly happy to say. We only have 8 bits of location unknown news tonight. We've been able to locate more news tonight than we have any other night, and so this is the lowest amount of location unknowns that we've had in nearly a month. So it's great to hear. It's great for me to see that. It was great to finally get a location for most of the stuff we're showing tonight, and so we'll cover all of those location unknowns, and then we're going to start moving towards the Kharkiv and Belgorod area. But before we get there, we're going to answer 3 questions from the chat. After we answer those 3 questions, we'll then move on to the Belgorod and Kharkiv area. We'll then also move on down to the northern Donbass area as well and cover that bit of news, and then we're going to start moving towards the Orlivka area, and also well, actually we're going to be covering this little area in Luhansk along with the Severodonetsk news because they're actually tied into each other, and it's really interesting to hear. But after we cover all of that news in Luhansk, we're going to start moving towards Donetsk. But before we do that, we're of course going to take another pause and answer 3 questions from the chat. We'll then cover the rest of the news from the southern front, and then the rest of the news around the world, which we have a pretty decent amount of today, and it's always good to see. Also, let me get rid of that little marker. And then after we cover all of the international news, we'll return back to Kyiv to cover the speech from President Zelensky. And then that will round out the news for the night, and then we'll go on to answer everyone's live chat question, well, everyone's super chats, and then as many live chat questions as possible. Also, another thing y'all may have noticed is that this map used to be almost solid white with a couple of gray spots in it. Apparently, in the Google update that just happened a while ago, they've changed this to now the map shows up as mostly green, and it shows, I guess you could say, areas with high vegetation much better now than it used to. So, pretty interesting to see, and I just noticed that change yesterday, but didn't mention it. But with that, let's get straight into the news. Starting off in Kyiv today, we've actually seen that 3 large leaders from the NATO alliance have arrived in Ukraine today, and we can see that one of those people was Emmanuel Macron, the president of France. A lot of people have contentious opinions about Macron. He seems to be the most balanced of leaders in the West in terms of his approach to the war. He's been calling Putin a load and also trying to negotiate some kind of agreement or settlement with the Ukrainians, with the Russians, to really no avail. And today it seems, well, also, let me not completely forget about his support to Ukraine. While he's trying to get some kind of peace agreement in between the Russians and the Ukrainians, France has also been sending over a decent amount of arms and aid to Ukraine as well, most specifically their most famous aid being the Caesar SPG. But here we can see that along with the, I believe it was the president of Italy, well no, the prime minister of Italy and the president of Romania, Macron arrived on a train today at the Kyiv station. And here's the video. But you see Ukrainian bodyguards swarming the platform, of course trying to make sure that these delegates are safe. And we can now see Emmanuel Macron right there, surrounded by his aides. We can also see that a French military officer, I'm not really sure what branch of service in the French military he's in, but we can see that he is in Macron's entourage. Pretty interesting to see, and it actually seems like some very eventful discussions occurred today, and it seems that Macron is finally changing his stance towards Putin, and it seems that he's going to stop the phone calls and stop the attempts at negotiations due to what he said to President Zelensky today. Moving on to the next bit of news, we can actually see that at the very same train station in Kyiv, some wounded veterans that had returned from the front lines after getting treated for their injuries were greeted with thunderous applause at the train station as they, of course, I don't really know how to say it, disembarked the train and then were met by the crowd. And it was a wonderful thing to see, and I wanted to show this very much so because I feel like it was a very nice moment, and it does show that the Ukrainians still support their heroes on the front through and through and will never stop until this war is over. And so, here's the video. You see that the applause never stops and it just keeps going. Everyone is giving these heroes a hero's welcome, literally. We can now see them posing for some pictures, and I have to say that these guys definitely deserve this kind of welcome back to Kyiv. These soldiers have been out there fighting on the front line for almost 4 months and have suffered serious injuries. This man has actually lost his arm, and now he's an amputee. And they did this all in service of Ukraine, and if you probably asked them would they go and do it again, these guys would probably say definitely, without a doubt, without question. And these guys certainly deserve a whole bunch of praise, and it looks like the people in the train station, of course, gave it to them. I'm very glad to see that they did get that, because I know that probably means a lot to them, and it lets them know that everyone in Ukraine is greatly appreciative for everything that they've done and everything they've gone through to try and keep Ukraine free. So with that, we're now going to start moving out of Kyiv. And also, before we do, I'm going to touch back on the Macron little, I guess you could say, chronicle, and discuss what they did today. So once Macron arrived, him, the Prime Minister of Italy, and also the President of Romania went and traveled, of course, like everyone does, out to the Bucha Hospital European area and reviewed, I guess you could say, the atrocities that were committed by the Russians there. Afterwards, they then went to a press conference, and they said some interesting stuff. The Romanian and Italian, I guess you could say, heads of state said some interesting stuff, but the most interesting things came out of Macron, because he actually started to show that France was going to become much more supportive of the Ukrainian cause and completely stop trying to negotiate with Putin, at least as much as they have been. They may try and backtrack on that and see if there is some kind of a peace agreement that can be reached, but it seems that Macron is switching his narrative from what he used to be saying, where he said the West will negotiate something with Russia and Ukraine may have to give up a little bit of land, and it seemed like he was starting to switch his talking points today more so in we should support Ukraine 100% and everything they want. So hopefully that stands true once he leaves Ukraine and actually returns to France, but of course only time will tell, and we'll have to see if what he said today in Kyiv does stand up to it. So with that, we're now going to move out of Kyiv, and we're now going to move into Russia, where we've seen two interesting bits of news today here as well. We actually saw that the Coca-Cola company, one of the Western holdouts, I guess you could say, that has continued to do business in Russia, has finally pulled out of the country and is leaving entirely. They say as their stocks are running down, they're not going to resupply any Coca-Cola beverages or any of the beverages that are owned by the Coca-Cola company, and they're going to now exit out of the Russian economy. This, of course, just brings you to the link where I got this, and it also has a Twitter post from the Kyiv Independent confirming this, which the Kyiv Independent has been pretty much confirmed as a very tried and true source of news so far during this war. And so we can see that once again, more companies are pulling out, and Coca-Cola isn't really as big of a company as Pepsi in Russia. Pepsi actually got a holding in Russia before the Cold War was even over, but still, Coca-Cola is a massive beverage company, I guess you could say. Not only do they sell Coca-Cola, they own a whole bunch of other beverages that the Russians may, of course, like. And now that the Coca-Cola company is pulling out of the country, the Russians are now going to find them pulling their belts even tighter in terms of the consumer goods that they're able to get, because there's just less and less of it. Of course, we heard that the Russians tried to reopen McDonald's. We don't know how successful that is at the moment, but I'm pretty sure that it's not the same. With that, we're now going to be moving to the next bit of news within Russia, where we could see that the Russians, unlike the Ukrainians, thank their soldiers for their service in an entirely different way. And we actually have seen this before, at least in a sort of way, when a Russian soldier got wounded. But we can see today that the Russians thanked a wife of a soldier for her husband's service, and she got in receipt, and I'll read it off the Reddit caption for y'all real quick, oil, a bit of flour, buckwheat, sugar, and oatmeal. And this is what she got as a gift for her husband's service in the Russian army. And so here's the video, and she's actually going to show it to y'all for what it is. So here's the video.
Я, конечно, не Александр Григорьевич из мемов, но показать кое-что он тоже выпил. Это что-то.
So you're opening up the bag,
Ножом я не хочу такое.
and she pulls out the postcard. They always got to include the postcard. And now you see the oil.
Маслечко.
Usual kit of oil. We saw that with a wounded guy months ago.
Муки немножко.
And we now see the bags of just like raw stuff, buckwheat, flour, the lot.
Сахарочек. И овсяночка. Это мне позавтракать, а это испечь.
And the Russians have such little care for their soldier service that they don't even try and package these nicely. They literally just take like plastic shopping bags, dump the stuff into it, and then just tie them shut. This is something that we do in my house when we're collecting trash. Just how we use old shopping bags for trash bags. And it's hilarious to me to see that the Russians do that, but they do that in an attempt to thank someone for their husband's or their spouse's service. And it's just insane to me, and it's hilarious to think that when everything comes out of the wash for the Russians, this is how they're thanked for their service. A little bit of buckwheat, a postcard, and that's it. Maybe some sunflower seed oil as well, and that's all they get. The Ukrainians get a decent amount of pay. They get a hero's welcome when they return home, thunderous applause. The Russians, just a bag of flour. It's very pitiful, and I hope that a lot of Russian soldiers actually see this and maybe a comparison to what the Ukrainians are getting, so that way they can see that they're actually getting the short end of the stick here in terms of who actually cares for their own people. And the Russian government certainly does not care for the Russian people or the soldiers that are serving in the military. And so with that, we're now going to move out of Russia, and we're now going to move down into the location unknowns, which we have a pretty small amount of tonight, which once again, I'm really excited for, because that means we have more news to cover in other areas of the world. Moving on to the location unknowns, starting off, we can actually see a little bit of footage from some of the remnants of the Wagner group, although this may have been before their headquarters was attacked, operating in Ukraine somewhere. Of course, it was a location unknown, so we don't know where this was in particular. It could have been in, say, Popasna or Mariupol. We know that for the most part, they were operating in Popasna for the majority of the war, and so this may have been in the area. But here's the video. You can now see him firing the machine gun in small bursts through the doorway. We can't see what's outside due to the glare. What the hell was that? Wait a minute, hang on. What is that? That's a stuffed dog that he put on like a key ring. I was watching that video and I was trying to figure out, is that like a loose piece of dirt that's bouncing around down there? But it's like some kind of like a plushy thing on a key ring that you get from like Buc-ee's here in the United States, and he's put it on the machine gun. That's kind of bizarre. But anyways, that's just a small bit of footage of course, a Wagner PMC firing a machine gun through an open doorway somewhere in the country. We know that the Wagner group, by and large, met their demise in, I believe it was Kyiv at the Victory Stadium. Let me try and see if I can find it here. Let's see, it's somewhere on this street. There it is. Stadium Pobyedy. Which is, of course, means Victory Stadium in Russian or Ukrainian. They're pretty similar languages, actually. But they got attacked by the Ukrainians, apparently by some kind of a cruise or a ballistic missile attack, and most of the Wagner group was in the stadium at the time of that missile attack, and a large amount of them got wounded and killed. So I think that video may have been before that attack, because for as far as I know, the Wagner group has almost been negated to a very small group at this point. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where you can see a little ouchie happen with one of the Russian soldiers. This Ukrainian drone is about to watch this lone Russian soldier come wandering down the street, and it's going to follow him for a little bit and then drop a VOG on him. For those of y'all who don't know, a VOG is another type of hand grenade that's used by both sides pretty heavily, but we can now see the Russian kind of speed walking down the road. When you see the drone just following him and watching him, and you're about to see the VOG get let loose. About right here. Yep, and now it's let loose. It's flowing down to the ground. And another thing I would like to note is that while it's a VOG, which is a kind of grenade, they have stripped the thing down fairly well, and they've also added a nose cone to it and stabilized fins, so that way this thing will actually go straight down instead of like what the Russians do with the ghetto cups, where they just kind of drift around wherever. We can now see it well on its way to the soldier, and ouch. I don't think he'll be getting up from that one. Well, it looks like he did. Well, actually, wait a minute. They multiplied. Hang on. Okay, wait a minute. Now I got a little bit of context. That actually shocked me. I seriously thought they had just multiplied into 2. But apparently there's one soldier here on the lower side of the screen and one soldier on the higher side of the screen, and one of them is carrying the other, or they're just walking alongside each other. It's really hard to tell. Or maybe, I don't know. I mean, maybe they were... No, I'm not going there, but we can see the bomb explode, they fall to the ground, and then they get up and they just go running in 2 separate directions. And it looks like they really have no aim as to where they're going. It looks like they're just running. We can actually see one guy get back on the road. He's pretty dedicated to the bit, and he then ran into the tree line after running down the road. We can now see the drone trying to find them, and we can see one of the guys just ran out. The guy who ran through the field, he's now running across the street again, but his friend seems to be staying under the trees. I don't know if he's been seriously wounded and he's just fallen out, or if he's waiting for the drone to pass. Can't really tell. And now we can see a civilian car roll up, which is probably a Russian commandeered vehicle. It looks like there's Russians in that car. It's not marked with Z's, though, that we can see, but it was definitely a Russian car. But that was crazy to me, because I watched the video up to this point and I was like, oh yeah, that would be an interesting one to include. And it was almost like it's almost like this explosion created some kind of a cellular mitosis, because these guys were looking like one solid person, and then when they get up, there's 2 of them. Anyways, an interesting video. We don't know if they were heavily wounded, but I'm sure that if they weren't wounded, that grenade gave them quite a shock and would probably freak them out a huge deal. Apparently, they didn't hear the drone, and probably had no idea that they were being watched at all, and so a random explosion occurring in front of you would just be horrific, you know, at least psychologically, and so I'm sure that freaked them out, and that's why they just started scattering and running in every direction after the VOC dropped. With that, we're now going to move on from this bit of news, which was interesting, and although, you know, kind of a little nasty, it was a little hilarious how they just literally just split into 2 people, and they looked like one until that point. And we're now going to move on to the next one, where we're going to see something happen to the Ukrainians today that wasn't all too good. Usually, hopefully the video loads. We're going to see if it loads. Come on. Reddit always has a little bit of a questionable time with this. Come on. All right, we're going to click refresh, and then it'll load. That's the usual Reddit thing. Yep, there we go. So, I'm just going to let y'all know, I don't know a lot about car suspensions, car motors, really how cars work in general. But one thing I can tell you, and most people can tell you on Earth, is that when the steering wheel comes detached from the steering column, you're having a small bit of trouble. And we can see as this guy's driving, the steering wheel detaches and they go crashing into a ditch. Oh, Lord. It's hilarious because no one looks like they got injured. It looks like they did come to a bit of a controlled stop while they were falling off the road. But it was hilarious. This guy was still trying to steer for a second after the steering wheel just popped out of the dashboard. So let's watch that again. He tries to stick it back in after he sees it's detached, and he tries to steer it, and it's just not responding. Obviously, the steering wheel's been disconnected from the rest of the column, but let's watch that one more time. Look at him. Oh, gosh. It's all in good fun, though. None of them were hurt, you can tell. And so it was just, I bet it was just a hilarious little bit of shock to that driver who was trying to stick the steering wheel back onto the column and try and regain control, but he just started sliding off the road and into a ditch. But hopefully they were able to recover the car, or at least reconnect the steering wheel to the column and get back on the road again, because I know that would probably be a huge aggravation to sit there and have the steering column just disconnect from the wheel and then not be able to reconnect it for some while. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news, where we can see an FSB agent who turned sides. I have to give credit to Radio Free Europe, who provided this video. It was an incredibly good one, and it talked about a story of a Russian SFB, which is, I guess you could say, the modern version of the KGB, who had some experiences on the Russian military and decided to switch sides, and he's going to tell his entire story of how he got to Ukraine and why he's fighting for him, although he was an intelligence officer for the Russians years ago. And so, here's the video.
Если я приехал сюда в 2014 году не воевать за Украину, а воевать против путинского режима, и мне нужна была другая Россия, там, а не Украина, то за 8 лет, и вот особенно когда началась война, я уже сейчас воевал за Украину, и мне не нужна никакая Россия. Я не хочу вообще, чтобы это государство существовало на карте. Поучаствовал в иловайских событиях, но был не в котле, а с группой Жака. Ездил, мы собирали вот ребят, которые выходили. И когда эту колонну разбивали, мы там ездили, и по полям их собирали. То есть, ну, впервые попал сам под минометный обстрел, да. Ну, в общем, когда батальон вывели Донбасс, то как бы я не хотел сидеть на Днепропетровской области. То есть у меня часы тикают, война идет, я сюда приехал, ну, чтобы воевать. Как попасть в самую горячую точку и какая она? Донецкий аэропорт. Как туда попасть? Только через Дуг правый сектор.
And so here's what I'm about to explain here in a second, because he says he joined a right sector volunteer corps, and this is something that always has to be mentioned a lot. When the Donbass rebellions began in 2014, the Donbass rebels were entirely communist. So you had the Donetsk People's Republic and the Luhansk People's Republic. Both of their names suggest they're obviously a communist state. The antithesis, I guess you could say, to communism directly, the complete opposite of communism, is, I guess you could say, fascism. And so a large amount of the groups that formed as volunteer units to fight against the communists were fascists. That's not specifically to say that the Ukrainians are nothing but fascists, but whenever one extreme pops up, the other extreme is soon to follow. If you ever look at the history of Germany in the 30s and the late 20s, when Adolf Hitler was, of course, leading the Nazi Party pretty much into the popularity and success they would soon reach in 1932, they were combating the communists directly. And it was actually a very pitched political struggle in between both the communists and the fascists at the time, because once one extreme pops up, which surprisingly communism was first in Germany, the next extreme, fascism, which was a direct antithesis to communism, would pop up and directly, you know, combat them pretty much. Not saying that I'm picking one side or the other, but I'm trying to explain that while most of the volunteer units that did pop up were like right-wing extremist fascist groups, that was pretty much in direct antithesis to the far left-wing extremist communist groups that it popped up in the DPR and LPR. So I just wanted to explain that real quick. It's not like this guy is just a Nazi or anything. I just wanted to let you all know the kind of dynamics that went on at the time that led to both sides kind of forming the groups they had. But with that, we're going to let the video continue.
Ну все, волонтеров попросил, устроили. Я участвовал в зачистках, когда на одного боевика, который просто проспал, чтобы уйти с высокогорного села, заходила колонна сводная из силовиков, и я был старшей машиной, мы потратили 400 мин. 400 мин на минометы. Ну, то есть, это да, то есть, так по селу хуй. Ну, через 3 года я абсолютно понял, что это конфликт искусственный. А потом, когда случились вот эти исторические события Майдана, я исполнил обещание, которое дал себе в 14 лет. Обещание было себе участвовать в революции. То все думали, что она будет в России, она случилась в Украине. Все осознавали, что раз она случилась в Украине, в России ее не будет никогда. Первый же вечер я набрал там своего бывшего командира, Рема, и говорю: Рэм, забери меня на войну. Он говорит: все, куда заехать? На перекрестке я краем глаза вижу очень странную картину. В забор въехала русская боевая машина десанта, вот эта БМД-4 новая. Выскакивает солдат и кричит: стоять, стоять! Расстояние там метр, да, до него. Не перепутаешь. Флаг России, ну вот шеврон из триколора. И в этот момент я принимаю решение стрелять. Я одиночным делаю где-то 5 выстрелов в сердце, грудь. Он хрипит, падает. Ну а нас начинает расстреливать пулемет и автомат. Пули вот так летают. Передний просто потрясающий боец из Буча. Игорь, ну у него кишки выпали, наверное, на первой же секунде. Он пытался открыть дверь, ну, 200-й. Слева от меня пилот дрона, у него рука-нога, вдребезги, как у меня кости. И я кричу водителю: газуй, газуй, газуй. Ну и хоп, чувствую хлопок, удар. И просто руки нет. Я думал, ее оторвало.
And there you can see, he was actually shot earlier on in this very war that started off on February 24th, 2022. He just recounted the story of how that happened. And you can see right there, I guess you could say the wound from where they had to sew up the injury from where he got shot. And here, and even here, this video made by Radio Free Europe, once again, huge credit to them, is saying that he's going to go and keep fighting for Ukraine after he's been shot. No one would ever look at him wrong if he was to say, you know what, I've done my part, I'm going to stop fighting. Everyone would say he's still a hero because he took a bullet for the country. And yet he's still taken a bullet, recovered from it, and now he's saying he's going to go back and keep fighting. And that is something when you've got a Russian guy born and raised in Russia who worked for the SFB, which to get in the SFB, you pretty much have to be pretty much I guess you would say blind patriot to the point that you would do anything for Russia. He left the SFB, came to Ukraine, and now he's fighting for them, shot his own people pretty much when they invaded the country, got wounded because of it, and now he's going to go back and continue to fight against them because he knows that the Ukrainians are in the right. And that's huge credit to him. And so I'm going to let the last bit of this video run its course, and then we'll, of course, discuss it a little bit more and move on to the next.
Я во время ранения этого пересмотрел такое отношение к войне. У меня пропала окончательно романтизация войны. Вот это вот желание контрстрайков и героизма. То есть я осознал принцип просто полезности на фронте. И для меня, ну, это просто обязанность, потому что я уже не хочу войны ради войны там, а мне нужен мир в этой стране, в Украине.
With that, the video ends, but huge credit to Radio Free Europe who did provide that video. And it's a very interesting thing to hear this guy who has such an interesting story and his whole entire journey to Ukraine and how he's actually been involved in what Ukraine has become since the Maidan Revolution in 2014. And that he's out there and he's fighting for what he believes in, just like every other Ukrainian does. And there's of course different reasons. He, of course, has a bit of a dislike for the Russian government and what they've done based off his experiences in Chechnya, and of course there's many different Ukrainians with different kinds of beliefs. There's people who just want to make sure that Ukraine is free. They want to make sure that they can join NATO, the European Union. They're all fighting for one thing, though, the same thing, which is for Ukraine to be a sovereign nation and to decide what it wants and for its people to say what they want. And it's great to know that people like him, of course, are fighting for the Ukrainian side and know what's right. So huge credit to him, and what a story, I gotta say. And so with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news where you can see a Caesar SPG in action. If you watched the summary today, you would have actually seen this video. And we can see here the Caesar SPG driving down this dirt road and taking a left turn out into this field to get ready to fire. I have huge respect for the Caesar SPG for its pack-up in, I guess you could say, setup times. It's around 20 seconds apiece. And so not only is it using the same 155mm shells that the M777 is using, it's much easier to pack and unpack, which makes it a lot easier for them to avoid counterfire. Unfortunately, I didn't include the video today of the French sending over more, but the French have sent over 6 more of these Caesar SPGs to Ukraine as of today, and we should see those hitting the front lines within a week. We now see after the Caesar SPG fired, it's already packed up and it's back on its way. Of course, they compressed the video a little bit, so we didn't actually see them going through the takedown procedures and getting ready to move, but it is a fast procedure. They literally just tilt the gun back down onto the pretty much truck bed. They take up the, I guess you could say, the plow, the supports near the rear, and then it's ready to go. And so it's a really quick setup and takedown time, and that's what the Caesar SPG is good for. And especially its range as well. I believe it has a range that is identical to the M777, and so not only is it quick to pack and unpack, it has as good a range, and it's as accurate as the M777. So honestly, I would say it's a little bit better. And so hopefully the Ukrainians can get more of these, because it seems that the French will be supporting them a little bit more here in the future. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news where we can see a father and son reunited. Sadly, I cannot play the audio because it does have copyrighted music in it, but look at the joy in this kid to see that his dad, who's been fighting to protect his child, returned from the front. It's very nice and it's very heartfelt, and so I'm just going to let y'all see the video. And we can even see the dog getting in on the celebrations as well. But isn't that just sweet? And a lot of kids all around the world think their dad is a hero, but this kid can know for sure it's a fact his dad is a hero. And the dog even knows it too. So, very sweet little video, and it's great to see that child was able to be reunited with his dad, even when his dad's out there facing death and danger every single day, but he does it to make sure he can protect his kid. And so, a sweet little video, and I hope that dad makes it through the war and is able to give his child a good upbringing and make sure that his child knows what he went through and what he did to make sure that his son would grow up in a free Ukraine. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news, where we can see the R-18s go on a mission. Now, we haven't seen these for a while, at least drone footage like this, but we've actually seen these spider-looking drones take off from their original starting position and go out towards Russian targets and attack them. Unfortunately, I can't play the audio. It does have copyrighted music in it, but we can see the R-18 taking off right there, and we can see the drone that's the camera drone right here. We can now see the R-18 on its way. It just looks like a spider to me. It's called an octodrone, I believe, which means it has 8 separate motors. And this thing is actually pretty big for a commercial-sized drone. I think this is what Amazon Prime was thinking about using to deliver packages. It's that large. And it's on its way. It's just traveling around, and you can see it just kind of on a mission. I don't know why, but for some reason it just looks funny to me. We can now see that it's found maybe a couple of Russians in a tree line. We can see some kind of a heat signature down there, and we can now see the octocopter, the R-18, get right on top of the heat signature, and now we can see there's a Russian squad over here, and it looks like maybe a BMP-1 or a 2 down here in the tree line. So now the octocopter is dropping the bombs, and the bomb hits the BMP. We can now see the Russians over here get up a little bit and start looking in that direction, and they're like, oh no, we're in trouble. And we can now see a montage of this R-18 going all around the front lines, wreaking havoc on Russian units and destroying multiple vehicles, infantry, and supplies as well. This thing's gotten quite a kill streak. Not, of course, over today. This is over the course of several days. But the beginning footage was from today. We could see right there, actually, that I couldn't tell if it was Ukrainian or Russian soldiers, but we could see soldiers surveying a destroyed T-72B3. And when you put it into perspective, an R-18 drone, I believe, only costs... Let's pull it up, actually. Let's just get a hardcore figure on this. R-18 drone cost. An R-18 drone costs around $20,000. And these $20,000 drones can destroy, with maybe like a $500 bomblet, a $3.5 million tank. And when you put that into perspective, in terms of economics, spending $20,000 to have the potential to destroy 3.5 million is a incredible exchange rate. And so if the Russians destroyed this R-18, even after it only destroyed one Russian main battle tank, it has already achieved its goal of causing more monetary damage to the Russian armed forces than the Russians could ever inflict by destroying that one single drone. And so you can see here why drone warfare will probably become the future, because drones are much cheaper than, say, a main battle tank, they're more economical, and you can get more of them. And that's always what we see wars heading in the direction of. If it's cheap, economical, and you can get more of them, and of course inflict more damage with them, that's most likely the direction that warfare will be heading into. And so I would say that what we're seeing, and I've said this multiple times, but what we're seeing here is is obviously the direction of what war is going to be heading into. It's not going to be heading into super suits. I don't think that's going to be a thing in the future, just my opinion. I don't think soldiers are going to be clad with some kind of Iron Man suits. Those things are incredibly expensive. You're going to see them with the normal ballistic armor they have now, but there's going to be drones in every single unit, and they're going to use them much like mortars are used these days. Or even better, they may be used as anti-tank weapons and really anti-everything weapons, because these things are versatile. They can destroy anything and everything on the field because they attack from the top straight down. And there's nothing that is impervious at the moment to a direct top-down attack. So with the video continuing, we can see even more vehicles being destroyed by these R-18s, just one after another. And it's furthering home my point that this $20,000 drone has caused millions, maybe tens of millions of dollars in damage to the Russian armed forces. And I just saw someone say men riding in drones. That, in my opinion, is a helicopter. And those things are big enough that they are usually picked up pretty easily and shot down. But that would be pretty interesting to see like a quad drone, like a quadcopter drone being used like an attack helicopter. I wonder if that would actually be effective. But now we can see the R-18 lifting back off at the end of the video and flying away from its original target that we saw at the very beginning. And it's incredible to see that the Ukrainians can inflict so much damage on the Russians with something as simple as a drone. With that, we're now going to be moving on to our last bit of location unknown news, where we can see Russians doing what they're famously known for. There's, of course, a stereotype that goes all around the world that the Russians drink vodka. And we can see here that the Russians, in their free time on the front, are getting drunk on vodka. Here's the video.
Сидим на войне, міне менің еуратқан тур, от которого оглох я, блядь. Менің автомат. Міне отырауыз. Әзірек соғыш бара.
You see them with the vodka bottles.
Біздің малайлар еғойды.
Разрядился, нет?
Ну-ка, көрсетелі.
And we can see he's got a vodka bottle in his actual jacket. I don't know if that's actually called a tunic. I don't know if that's the correct term. But he's got vodka in the jacket. They're going around getting pissed drunk. And this is the worst place to get pissed drunk. They're right near an AT weapon. They may be getting in a firefight soon, and they're going to get plastered, which is obviously going to make them fight worse because they're going to be seeing double vision. They're going to be shooting at something that isn't even there, and then they're going to get slaughtered by the Ukrainians. So it will make it a lot easier for the Ukrainians to wipe these guys out if they're dog drunk, but at the same time, the Russians are just so poorly put together, poorly trained, and the average soldier is so ill-equipped mentally for this war that they will get pissed drunk right when they're on the front lines.
Нет. Только не позвали его, только вспомнил.
Bizim
позиция заебись olmalı.
It's so stupid to see this, and it's incredible to believe that this is Russia's finest in the military. They're using nothing, as far as we know, but contract soldiers, and they are starting to use conscripts to a larger degree. We're sort of getting that idea, but they, of course, quote-unquote, call them contract soldiers because they force conscripts to sign contracts, which then technically makes them a contract soldier. But here they are getting pissed drunk on the battlefield, which is a poor display of, I guess you could say, soldiering, to get drunk before you go into battle. While historically, though, that is something normal, it's not normal to get pissed drunk like these guys are going to be. Normally, when you look through the pages of history, it would be common to get a little shot, maybe a little sip of alcohol. It was normal for the British in World War I to actually give soldiers a ration of rum or some other kind of spirit before they went over the top, because a liquid courage would help them out a bit, because, back then everything was rather grim in World War I, and so giving them a little bit of liquor was actually a bit more of an advantage than a hindrance. But getting drunk like that is a bad idea. And another interesting thing about the Russian stereotype with alcohol consumption is that it actually has a historical precedent to it. back in the day during the Russian Empire, and this pretty much continues all throughout history, but this is the very beginning of alcoholism in Russia. At the very beginning of the Russian Empire, around the time of Tsar Peter I, alcohol became, actually I believe it came before Peter I, but alcohol consumption, well really the production of alcohol, became a monopolized state industry that was run by the Russian crown, pretty much, and they would harvest massive amounts in taxes off of alcohol. And also, by keeping the population dog drunk, it made them, I guess you could say, too inept to actually rise up against the government and actually hold them accountable for what they were doing to them. And so for hundreds of years under the Russian Empire, the government made sure that the Russians got enough cheap vodka, but made plenty of money off of it. So that way the Russians would stay drunk, they wouldn't rise up against the government, and the Russian, I guess you could say, aristocracy would profit off of it. And so when the communists came through around the 1917s and actually started the Russian Revolution, alcohol was looked at as a thing that subjugated the lower classes. And you would see that at the very beginning of the Soviet Union as a state, Lenin completely outlawed the production, sale, and consumption of alcohol of any sort, most particularly vodka, because vodka is the easiest alcohol to produce in Russia due to what they have available. So alcohol was completely banned for some while in Russia until Lenin died. Then Stalin took power, and alcohol came back with a vengeance. Stalin had state-run vodka manufactories set up that would then do exactly what the Russian Empire did. They would give vodka to the masses in large, very cheaply. They would get drunk, so drunk that the Russian government could do whatever they wanted to, and the people were too inept to rise up against the Russians. And from then on, alcoholism became a firm, cemented, pretty much facet of life in Russia, to the point that vodka, just in its own right, could be exchanged as a currency of its own amongst Russians. Like, people would actually save up vodka in the Soviet Union to pay for their kids to go to college, and they would pay off the college dean with a certain amount of alcohol. Just for y'all to know how bad alcoholism is in Russia. In fact, it's so bad that people in Russia are still dying from alcohol poisoning because they drink to the point that they literally die from the poisoning of the alcohol. So it's a huge issue, and we could see even on the front lines, the Russians just let their soldiers nearly drink themselves to death. And in this case, they may be literally drinking themselves into a very quick grave. With that, we're now going to move out of the location unknown news because we've covered all of that, and we're now starting to move on into the Kharkiv and Belgorod area. But before we get there, we're of course going to take a quick pause and answer 3 questions from the chat, and once we answer those 3 questions, we're then going to move on to the Kharkiv and Belgorod news and also the Luhansk news as well. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so first up from the super chats, we have a $50 donation from the Quaked Oat, who says, sorry for always being a lurker. Thanks for always getting me through the third shift. Here is some of the coffees I owe you guys, and Slava Ukraine.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, and it's always great to get a little bit of coffee money. Of course, we rely heavily on coffee, and I may sound a little bit more energetic tonight, and that's because I drink my coffee closer to the stream than normal, about 20 minutes before instead of 30 to 40 minutes before. And so hopefully that can carry me through a little bit further in the stream tonight, because coffee is a blessing on this channel. Matthew and me both drink it, and it helps us to keep this thing running. And I got to thank you so much. And I'm glad that we can help you get through your third shift, because I don't know where you work, but sometimes work can be dreadfully long. You know, like you just sit there and the time feels like it's going on forever, and then you look up at the clock and only 5 minutes has passed. I know that feeling. I used to work at grocery stores before, and so I can completely sympathize with you, and I'm so glad that this helps to pass the time, because if for anything, I'm appreciative just that the stream does that. So I thank you so much for the support. And also the coffee money. It always helps us out a lot. And we'll make sure to drink up on coffees as much as we can, and maybe get a little bit of creamer. I love creme brulee flavored creamer. It's pretty good. It's normal. It's better than hazelnut. And so that's kind of become the mainstay of the kind of creamers that we use. But with that, I hope that addresses the comment. And thank you once again so much for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $25 donation from Old Vet, who does not leave a comment. But thank you very much, Old Vet, for your support of the channel. Through these donations, it helps us to keep running the channel and helps us to run the channel daily. So thank you very much for that. And Enforcer, would you like to add a couple of bits into that?
Yes, I would. Every single bit of support this channel gets helps our like news machine to grind on another day. And so every time someone gives us support, we're able to focus on the next week or tomorrow or whenever. Because of course while this is a war, and of course it's something that we try to ensure that we don't really profit off of. We, of course, have to pay our bills and make sure that we can eat. And so whenever anyone supports us on these streams, they help us to focus on the basics that we have to cover just to survive. So that way I can sit down and spend almost 9 hours a day, 6 days a week, making sure that all of this news is put together. And so I thank you so much once again. That support will help us to keep on running this channel, and I'm more than appreciative for it. Every bit of support counts, and I'm appreciative for everyone who's always sending support our way, vocally and also monetarily, to help us keep on living. So with that, thank you once again, and we're going to move on to the last question of this segment, and then we're going to move on to the Kharkiv, Belgorod, and Luhansk news.
And the last one of the segment goes to WF2U, who puts in a $20 donation, and he thinks he has figured out the Morse code. He says the Morse code text is Si vis pacem parabellum, not one step back.
You are absolutely correct. This one wasn't enciphered. Sadly, I did work with one of my viewers to create the encoded Morse code that was on the stream for an incredibly long time, but no one cracked it, and I was actually supposed to type up the cipher that he sent me, because there was a cipher for it, but I was never able to get around to it, and I felt really bad about that. But I just decided to move on, because I don't ever think I'll have time to actually make that cipher where people can translate that one. And so I've just decided to go back to normal Morse code with no encryptions in it whatsoever, so that way everyone can have something to decipher every night, and something that's a little bit fun. So I hate that the last one wasn't deciphered, because that one went on for a long time, and I was like, oh, hopefully someone will figure it out, but no one did, and I didn't have time to make the cipher. But of course, I think our Discord member Serenity, who did come up with that Morse code message, I thank you so much. He helped. We of course talked about it a bit, went over it, and came up with it. We had a message in it. It said like the Enforcer, Slava Lee Spring Army, but no one deciphered it, sadly. But of course, you did get it correct, and congratulations, you got it right. So I hope that does address the comment, and congratulations. So with that, we're going to move on out of the question segment. That was our last question for the moment. If you have sent in a super chat, or if you're going to, do not worry. We do answer all of them by the end of the night, so hang tight. We'll probably answer within the next question segment, or after the news is over. So with that, we're now going to move on into the Kharkiv area, Belgorod, and Luhansk as well. So starting off in Kharkiv, we haven't gotten any news from the front line. Of course, it's a little bit of an intermediate thing going on up there. We can kind of get some news sometimes, other times we don't. Right now, it seems that we didn't get any news from the front today, so I'm not sure if the Ukrainians are exerting minimal amounts of pressure or no pressure at all. But we did see today that the 92nd Brigade, which is in the area, has been housing their trophies in some undisclosed location that's near Kharkiv, but we don't know exactly where. And we can see that they have loads of Russian tanks here. It looks like two T-72B3s right here alone. And when they pan the camera, we see another T-72B3. And we can't see anything outside. But these are three nearly operational, it appears. They're almost entirely operational. T-72B3s that could be used by the Ukrainians in counterattacks. The Russians have provided... Well, this one actually looks like it's taken some damage. I think they may be trying to fix this one up a little bit. But they have at least two. They have three in there that may be operational, but two that certainly are. And those tanks, if you were to put them into a Russian equivalent, 2 tanks makes up 20% of a normal BTG's tank force. And so they've been able to get a sizable amount of tanks that are captured in this one warehouse, and hopefully they can get them all running and have them operational once again to be used on the front lines here soon. Great to see, and it's really cool that the 92nd is gathering these things up like they're literal war trophies in a building to show off. But with that, we're now going to move out of Kharkiv and into Belgorod, which has had a little interesting occurrence today, where we've actually seen that some Russians have been refused treatment for their wounds. Now, the caption says something a little bit different than what I'm about to describe. The caption says that there's too many Ukrainian war wounded that are in that building. But due to a Redditor who was able to translate this, and I read his translation, these Russians said nothing about Ukrainian wounded in the hospital. They're not in there. They do not exist. However, these Russian soldiers here have received shrapnel wounds, and they have gone to this hospital and have requested treatment. The hospital said, hey, listen, we're not helping y'all out, get on out of here, and then they left one hospital. According to them, this is the second hospital in this video that they have gone to in Belgrade asking for treatment for their shrapnel wounds, and they got turned down twice at the first hospital and this one, and they told them, you're going to have to live with it, we're not fixing that stuff, get back to the front. And so I'm gonna let y'all see the video. This is what the guy's saying throughout the entire thing, but just look at the disappointment in his face as he realizes that the Russians don't care about him whatsoever. He's just a number on a sheet, and regardless of whether he gets wounded or killed, they could really care less. And so here's the video.
Городская больница Белгорода, центральное приемное отделение. Сказали, идите нахрен. Про гражданских мы вас тоже лечить не будем. Ребята, воюйте с осколками, продолжайте дальше. Вы никто, и мы вас не знаем. Вызывать нас никак. Защищайте Родину, продолжайте дальше. Городская поликлиника, военный госпиталь, да, здесь на втором этаже. Ну что, нас отказались лечить. Это подтверждение, сказали, идите. В плановом порядке. В плановом порядке по месту службы, а место службы у нас не существует.
Мы это все объясняли.
Мы объясняли, много раз нас послали на 3 буквы.
Очередной раз послали.
Осколками, говорит, воюйте, они сильно нам мешать не будут.
This guy right here, along with his friend, have just realized they're fighting for the wrong side because they can't even get treatment for the shrapnel wounds from a Russian hospital. There's really not much to comment on that. The video speaks for itself, and it's insane. It's crazy to think that whenever Russian soldiers actually need to rely on their government for help after they've been wounded fighting for their country, their government falls silent and just goes, well, you're on your own, man. It's tough, you know, that you got injured, but we have nothing to do with it. But we sent you there. We sent you there into Ukraine to fight against a country that's beating our, you know, with lack of a better word, beating our asses right now. And you've now come back to Russia looking for a little bit of medical assistance, and we're just going to flat out tell you, no, you need to live with it and go back to the front and keep fighting for the country that loves you so much. It's unbelievable that the Russians have the gall to do that to their own soldiers, but apparently they do. And it looks like maybe, hopefully, more Russian soldiers will hear these stories and start getting a little bit unhappy with what they're having to deal with. We're now going to move out of the Belgrade and Kharkiv area, and we're now going to bypass the Chuhuiv, Balaklia, and Izium area, as nothing has happened there. We're also going to bypass the Lyman area. Nothing has happened at Lyman today. And while some people are saying that the Russians are still trying to push out of Lyman, there's not enough activity based off of video evidence there to suggest that the Russians are actually pushing the Ukrainians back. The Ukrainians have been holding the hill line that's near the Severodonetsk River on the side for quite a while, and it looks like they'll continue to do so as long as their positions do not run out of ammunition or supplies. So we're now going to move further down the river, where we've actually seen today that the 80th Air Assault Brigade has destroyed even more tanks with a Stugna. And this is also something that I'm going to say is the direction of warfare, and this is kind of an overarching thing with the drone. But anyways, I'm going to let y'all see this video of the Stugna hitting a Russian tank. I'm going to have to mute it. We can hear that the Stugna did a launch, and the missile is now on its way. And we see the operator guiding it in, very ever so slightly, just making minor adjustments. Now it's actually a big adjustment. Now he's adjusted it back. And it hit the tank, of course, going straight through and burning it up. We can see a nice fire there churning out of the tank, which does let us know it was certainly destroyed. We can see a little bit of ammunition cooking off. And of course, the thick black smoke that is indicative of some kind of an ammunition or an oil fire. And so, pretty good video to see. And of course, it's great to see that the Russians are still taking losses. Before we move on to the Severodonetsk area itself, I actually forgot that we are running limited edition merch right now. And while I don't want to make a merciless plug, usually I save this for the beginning of the video, I forgot to plug the merch. So We do have limited edition merch up on our store. We have Tears of Russian Bots as a coffee mug, and we also have Moscow Mike and Professor Mortars as t-shirts and hoodies. And so if you would like to support the channel, make sure to get some. It does help us out a lot. And also, it'll let your friends know about our channel and some of the inside jokes that we have that a lot of people are endeared to at this point. So make sure to get some if you would like to support the channel. But with that, we're not going to, I don't like to plug merch too much in the middle of a stream because I feel like it's a little bit tasteless, but I completely forgot about it. So my apologies, but just want to let y'all know about the limited edition merch run that is still ongoing. It will stop running at 12 p.m. Midnight Eastern time on Saturday. So make sure to get some while you can. With that, we're now going to move up to the infamous river crossing. Y'all aren't going to believe this. I didn't believe it. I had to double check this information here. But the Russians did it again. They tried to cross the river at the exact same spot, and this time, their forces are so depleted after they set up this bridgehead, they wandered off some ways somewhere because they didn't have anyone to actually guard the bridge that they just laid out. And then the Ukrainians just walked up to it and blew it up. I mean, like, it's unbelievable. This is insane. Anyways, I'm going to show y'all this. You can actually see the remnants of the destroyed vehicles from the last attempted bridge crossing still there. They've never been recovered. So the video is starting right now, and you're about to see some footage of the Ukrainians on the bridge that the Russians just set up, and they're setting up explosives to blow the bridge up. There's no Russians around. The bridge was just set up a few hours ago, and the Ukrainians literally walked out onto it and blew it up. And now there's the video of it blowing up, and you can see the remnants of all the destroyed vehicles from the last time. Just for some of y'all to know in context, the Russians actually tried to have 2 BTGs cross the bridge crossing that they made before. The bridge crossing came under attack from the Ukrainians. Artillery obliterated the 2 or 3 pontoon bridges they had set up there and wiped out 2 entire BTGs worth of vehicles. And now we see them doing it again. They didn't wipe out BTGs, but they literally just walked up to the bridge crossing and blew the thing up. Now this is I'm really in shock. This is the craziest thing I've seen. The Russians set up a bridge. The bridges are a very special kind of equipment, and you don't have a lot of these because you just don't make thousands of bridges to lay out in the event you need them. You usually only make about 100 or 200 or so. And so the Russians lay out the bridge, and then the entire unit that did it said, it's time for lunch, and they just wandered off. And then the Ukrainians just walked up to this bridge that's just laying there and blew it up. So now the Russians will not be able to cross the river again. That's like the 4th or 5th time I think they've tried to do that. And they're just going to be, you know, like up the crap creek without a paddle again. And they're probably going to try and attempt the river crossing again and fail again because the Ukrainians know exactly where they're going and exactly how they're going to do it. And now they know that the forces are so depleted that are setting up the bridge and trying to cross it that they can't even guard the bridge. And they're somewhere else. And so they're just going to continuously have bridges lost and blown up in this exact same spot. Honestly, more power to them. If they want to lose as many bridges as possible in a single spot, I'm all for it. We're now going to be moving out of that area, and we're now going to be moving into Severodonetsk. We've gotten a decent bit of news, actually, around the Severodonetsk area today in particular, which is still the heaviest activity area on the front lines in terms of the video evidence we're getting out of it, which does suggest that this is the only active area of the front lines right now outside of Kherson, which we didn't even really get much videos out of today either. The Russians and the Ukrainians have been in this pitched battle for 2 weeks now, and they are still fighting this battle as hard as they can. The Ukrainians have not given up a single inch of ground for nearly 5 days to a week at this point, and the Russians are still throwing everything they have at the Ukrainians in this area. But here in a second, I'm about to explain why their time is up in this offensive, and they're about to no longer be able to pursue it. Starting off on this video, we can actually see that the Ukrainians are using a captured Russian T-72B3 to fire back at positions in Severodonetsk. So this right here is actually a Ukrainian T-72B3 captured by the Ukrainians from the Russians, and now they're using it in Severodonetsk to fire back at Russian positions. We can see it firing here at the buildings within the city. And just for y'all to know, sometimes I do get the unit identifiers wrong. I did check this video to make sure this vehicle didn't have any Z's on it, and it doesn't, so it's definitely a Ukrainian tank. We can now see it continuously firing into the buildings over and over. We can actually see it fire kind of low onto the street and now into the lower part of the building there again. And the Russians apparently are in this large compound over here, and the tank is just trying to push them out, perhaps. But we don't see the Russians on film, and so I do have to, of course, give a disclaimer. I'm not entirely sure if there are Russians in that building, because we cannot visually see them. The tank's now advancing on forward. We don't see any infantry support with it. Not really sure why. Maybe it's in the surrounding buildings. And we can now see the tank laying down a smoke screen. Some Russian tanks actually have a built-in ability where the engine can produce massive amounts of smoke and create a smoke screen for the entire tank. They also have white phosphorus grenades and grenade launchers that can also create smoke that's fired from the front of the tank outwards towards the front of the vehicle, but the smoke discharger for the engine makes sure to cover a tank's retreat. So we can now see it driving out of the area. And that's the end of the video, but it's very interesting to see that the Ukrainians are using a large amount of captured vehicles, and it's a really great deal for them because there's nothing lost and nothing gained. They capture the Russian tank, and if it gets destroyed, that was a Russian vehicle that was destroyed. They're not depleting any Ukrainian vehicles if that tank was to get hit and knocked out. So in their perspective, this is very economical. They didn't have to spend a dime getting the tank, and they didn't lose anything if the tank was to be blown up. So it's a very good thing to see that they're using them, and I believe it's a proper use of captured Russian vehicles. We're now going to be moving down into the city of Lysychansk on the other side of the Severodonetsk River, where we can see that the Ukrainians are still evacuating civilians from the city, and it appears to suggest that they're thinking that Lysychansk may become a defensive position. We can now see the soldiers moving around. Sorry for the video quality. But we can see the soldiers trying to round up the civilians and get them out of here before bad comes to worse. We can now see them taking one civilian that appears to maybe have been wounded, and they're now putting him on a stretcher and trying to get him out of there.
Yes.
You can see the devastation that's already reached Lysychansk. The Russians have been bombarding the city for some while, and it's very important to get these civilians out because they could be caught in the line of fire and subsequently be killed, much like the citizens of Mariupol. And we can see the soldiers trying to go through as fast as possible and get these people out. We see another person being carried out on a stretcher. And it's very frantic, but you can tell that the Ukrainian soldiers are trying to keep control of the situation and their emotions. And we can see them trying to look through some of the derelict and destroyed buildings and get everyone out. You can see there a little bit of blood on the floor, most likely from a Ukrainian citizen who was caught in that building when it got hit. And although I don't know what the Ukrainians are saying, they may be shouting like that into these doorways to try and see if they get a response back if someone's caught under the rubble and they're able to respond or whatnot. You can now see them moving stuff out of the building, and we can see a woman with what appears to be a register, and she's looking through it, and she's apparently telling something to the Ukrainian army official. Or she may be a city official telling something to the soldier. It's unfortunate to think that civilians have to live through this kind of stuff. Well, really not just civilians, everyone in general. I mean, like, it's not like army soldiers just need, well, soldiers in general just need to live through this stuff. No one needs to live through this. No one deserves this kind of suffering and terrible things being inflicted upon them. And it's great to know that the Ukrainian soldiers are doing their best to try and get people out of Lysychansk still. And we know that the Ukrainian army was able to get almost 90% of the civilians out of Severodonetsk before the fighting actually commenced. So by and large, there's only about 10,000 civilians left in the city of Severodonetsk in general. which is great compared to the 109,000 that could have been there if they didn't evacuate any of them. The same may be said for Lysychansk, although we're not really sure and we don't have a direct percentage of how many civilians have been evacuated out of that city just yet. Moving further on down towards the south of the city, we've actually seen that not only are the Russians trying to push into Severodonetsk, the Russians are now trying to exert more pressure on the southern side of the city of Lysychansk, where you can actually see that the Kadyrovites have shifted from Mariupol, and they've now certainly arrived at Lysychansk. Here's some videos released of the Kadyrovite forces fighting on the south of the city. When you see here a tank, I'm not really sure whose side this is. It looks like it may have a faint Z painted on the front, so this may be a Russian T-72B. You can now see them trying to pick up someone who may be wounded and get them out of there. You know, it's very interesting. The Kadyrovites have completely lost the TikTok star attitude they had for a good while, and it looks like this guy is pretty scared. What happened to all the bravery that they were exerting in Mariupol, shooting their guns at red lights? We don't see them doing that anymore, but you can see them with their red armbands pissing their pants. You can tell that once they actually hit frontline service and they're actually fighting in an active area at the front, they lose all of that cool nonchalantness that they've been trying to exude this entire time and make the Russian people believe they look like scared little kids. And these guys are about middle-aged. You can now see them sitting him down. And we see them still trying to get him out of there. And now we can see them sitting him on the ground and taking the AK. And then, oh God, you know, I don't know if these people have any sense in them, but this guy aims the barrel of the gun right at the guy's head for a second. Of course, his finger isn't around the trigger, but that's just a general rule of gun safety, is you never point the barrel at something that you're not intending to shoot. So look at him. He just points the barrel straight at the guy's face. If it was in frame, it's right at him. I think he's looking at the gun like it's a completely foreign thing to him. Look at me. He's like, oh, well, this is what a gun looks like. And then he hands it off to the other guy, who then aims it at the guy's face again. And now the guy's laying on the ground. No medics tending to him. The guy's moving a little bit, so whatever kind of wound he's gotten, he's still in there, but there's no medics tending to this guy. We now see the guy is still sitting there. Who knows how long it has passed in between the last clip we saw and now. It may be an hour, and still no medic has tended to this guy. You see he's still moving around a little bit, so he's still alive. Not a medic in sight. Now you see them grabbing his arm. And they're just going to drag him out. His shirt's falling off, his pants are falling off. And the guy's dead. He's dead, he died. And they didn't get a single medic to him the entire time that he was sitting in that building dying. Never cared about him once. You just see people going over there and checking on him like, hey, you dead yet? Okay, man, let us know. And now he's dead, and they're just going to put him in a sack, carry him off, and then they're going to give his wife some buckwheat and sunflower seed oil with a card. And that's how much the Russians care about their people. You can even see that amongst the soldiers themselves, they care very little about each other. Not a single one of them was in a rush to try and find this guy a medic or any kind of medical assistance or get him in a car and get him out of there to some kind of medical aid. They just let him sit there and die. I mean, like, at this point, you can't even say for some Russians that it's the Russian government that doesn't care about their people. It looks like Russians don't even care about Russians. And with that kind of mindset, they will lose this war, because there's no way that you can win a war if your own friends and soldiers don't even care about their fellow man. That you are losing the war at that point. So you can actually see that the Kharkivite soldiers at the south of Lysychansk are, of course, taking casualties. They're even showing that on film, and they're even showing them dying on film. Hopefully that doesn't get this video flagged, showing that. It wasn't really too graphic or anything. You just saw a guy laying around on the ground, but it's still something. I mean, like, there's really not a lot I can add to it. It's just a sight to see people just watch someone die and not even try and get them any help of any kind. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the Severodonetsk and Lysychansk area, and we're actually going to skip these bits of news, and we're now going to go to a little bit of news that I've heard today is going to be crucially important to how the Severodonetsk front is playing out. Based off of the news I've gotten today, if it is correct, and it does seem like it would be, by and large, pretty accurate to the situation, the Severodonetsk front may be running out of time, and the Russians may have to stop their offensive in this area completely due to a lack of supplies. Today, an ammunition dump and the city of Krustalny was hit by a Ukrainian attack, and the ammunition dump exploded. I'll show you all that on film here real quick. Here you can see a LPR citizen roaming around the streets. You see him showing off a fragment of some kind of weapon. And when you hear in the distance something fly in, and in a second you will see a massive explosion right there come from the ammunition dump.
Ебать, опять что-то прилетело, блядь.
In this next clip we also see the fire continuing to rage on later in the day, letting us know that the ammunition stores, if there were any left, were never recovered and just continued to destroy themselves in a fire. There's the plume from the remainder of the ammunition burning off. From what I've been told, this was one of the largest ammunition armories, I guess you could say ammunition dumps, that was supplying the entire Donetsk region. This ammunition dump being destroyed is supposedly going to be putting a massive hindrance on the Russian supply lines that are directly connected to the fight at Severodonetsk. And so based off of the loss of that ammunition, we may see the Russians pulling back their offensive efforts to a complete standstill here in the future, as they're going to lose the ability supply-wise to keep their soldiers running with ammunition. So if that is the case, we're about to see the Battle of Severodonetsk come to an end for a short while, with the city probably remaining contested still, but the Russians will be largely depleted of ammunition for some while until the Russians can figure out a way to get another supply depot to give them more ammo. So we'll be looking at that story, of course, trying to keep some major attention to it and see if that is how it turns out. And if we see the Battle of Severodonetsk dying down and coming to a close, that is going to let us know that that ammunition dump being hit had a direct effect on the supply situation at Severodonetsk. So now we're going to return back to Severodonetsk, and we can see that the Russians, of course, and the Ukrainians are still continuing actions against each other with artillery. Here in this clip, we can actually see a Russian MLRS firing towards the direction of the city. Now, I don't know what that is. That's on the turret of the MLRS near the rear of it. I don't know what in the world would be spewing flames out of that thing, so I can't really tell y'all what that is, but that was weird to me. We can now see inside the MLRS. Note the poor quality of the inside of this tank. Look at all the rust and decay on the paint that's on pretty much every single part of the vehicle. You can see here dirt and grime that's been built up, more dirt and grime down here. You see the white paint on the lining of the walls of the turret in very poor condition. Not at all like a Ukrainian SPG. If a Ukrainian SPG or any Ukrainian vehicle was kept up to this kind of standard, some kind of Ukrainian officer out there somewhere would flip and kill the soldiers that were maintaining this tank. But like everything in Russia, very poor condition. We now see the MLRS firing. And we can now see the supposed artillery hits from these missiles downrange. And that's the end of that video, and we can see that supposedly, according to this video, the Russians are bombarding the area around Severodonetsk with Mista S's. But before I move on to the next bit of news, I have been looking at the, the live chat, and I've seen a lot of people saying Australia is a continent. So, Matthew, if you could fill me in, since you've been watching the live chat more than me, what are they talking about?
So they must be talking about the poll that is put up that says, "Where are you from?" And just in case nobody knows, YouTube only gives us 4 options for our polls. So I would have included Australia, but I was only able to include North America, Europe, and Asia. And then the 4th option is my area is not listed, just so that way we can get a general idea of how many people are from other continents.
Okay, I was just wondering because I saw like one of the only comments in the live chat for a bit was Australia is a continent. You know, I was seeing that and I was like, what are they talking about? That has nothing to do with the Ukraine war. Just wondering. So we're going to move on from that. That's actually interesting for me to know. And also, a lot of people have been pointing out that video is fake. There's always the chance with Russian videos, a very high chance at that they are faked. The Russians seem to tie together a lot of videos that were made at separate times to try and make some kind of narrative. So that is a chance. So take what you saw at the end with the Russian artillery hitting with a grain of salt. It may have been fake. We're now going to move back towards the area of Lysychansk, where we've actually seen Russian jets once again firing in the direction of Ukraine, this time from Su-25s carrying unguided rockets. Copyrighted music. As you can see, the Su-25s here flying low over the city. It looks like they do have Russian camouflage schemes. And we can just see a whole bunch of footage of them flying really low over the same city over and over. Golly, was this an air show? Oh, also, what? Look at the Z's they painted on that thing. Oh, whatever. You know what? I'm not even going to cover that. That's just maximum stupidity at this point. You would think they just put a big red star on it. But no, they're going to paint Z's on the planes too. So we definitely know they're Russian. So we can now see the jets popping off their flares and firing their missiles at the exact same time. And they're going to show us this footage about 4 or 5 times. I don't know how these planes have that much flare and chaff in them. That's crazy. They're dropping like hundreds of little, I guess you could say clusters of it. We can now see them flying back over the city and on their way out. We now see Russian tanks rolling forward, kind of make it look like a combined arms video, but we know that the infantry, the tanks, and the aircraft all work separately from each other and have absolutely no coordination. But with that, we could see, of course, more Russian aircraft bombarding the Ukrainian lines with rockets, pretty much largely unguided. Of course, very long range. Of course, they're tilting up, which is trying to give them as much range as possible. And so those things are probably flying 5 miles or 7 miles, and they're going to fall in this massive spread that makes them incredibly ineffective, but they're going to hit almost everything on Earth. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news where we can see another grad barrage from the Ukrainians. We get nothing but videos from the rear lines of the Ukrainians of these MLRS barrages, but I have to show them over and over again because it shows 2 important things. One, it shows that the Ukrainians are levying large amounts of artillery against Russian forces. Second, it shows that they still have the supply ability to be able to get these MLRSs the rockets they need to continue working at such a pace. So we know that the Ukrainian logistics are well put together still, because these videos are always coming out daily from this area. We can see some launcher, which is incredibly loud, and we could see a Ukrainian. in his natural habitat amongst the wheat. He better watch out, or else Russell Crowe is going to be coming through and smack him in the face as he's wafting his hands through the fields of wheat. Of course, that's just a joke. But we can see here all of the rockets inside of a supply vehicle. They're now backing it up to the grad, and we're about to watch them actually load the grad. You can see that it looks like they just pick up each shell one at a time and just shove it into each little launcher, I guess you could say. A logistically simpler process than loading something like an Uragan or a Smerch, but still a process to be sure, and it requires a lot of space and a lot of effort in terms of trained crews to load these MLRSs, and also an additional vehicle to carry just the MLRS rockets alone.
Робота пройшла успішно, 2 цілі було поражено, все добре, нас відпустили, все добре.
And so we can hear the artillerist here giving his summary. He said they hit 2 targets and then they scooted, and he said all in all pretty okay, and I'd have to agree, pretty good deal. Great to know that they did apparently take out 2 Russian units. We're not sure what kind, whether there was infantry squads or vehicles or what, but they did knock out 2 of something, and 2 of something is better than 0 of something. So with that, great to see that the Ukrainian artillerists are still at work, and it's good to see that the Ukrainians are able to supply these units and keep them running. We're now going to move down to the area of Kherson, which is our last bit of northern Donbass, well, actually, Donetsk news, where we can see Ukrainian T-64BV get hit. I want to point out something here in this video, but I'm going to let the whole thing play out before I point it out. I'm going to see if the live chat notices the same thing I noticed. So here's the video. Actually, let me mute it because they add in music to everything. So it gets hit by an ATGM, and the smoke is billowing over the tank. And now we see it get hit in slow motion. And we're just waiting any second. Of course, they have to add the maximum amount of frames leading up to it. We can now see it hit. And you can see the smoke, of course, billowing up off the tank. And then the rest of the video is, of course, just the original one in slow motion. Now, I'm looking at the live chat, and I haven't seen anyone point it out yet. But what I noticed is that there was no subsequent ammunition explosion on this tank. We did not see any black smoke coming out of it, any fire from it, and the Russian drone did not stay around long enough to show us this tank brewing up and burning because the hit actually managed to puncture the front glacis. We never saw any of that. We saw the ATGM hit, a billow of white smoke, but we didn't actually see any visible damage to the tank or any proof that that hit disabled or destroyed that tank. And the Russians, of course, are very slick with making their videos like this, because that shot from that ATGM may have been weak enough that it actually didn't puncture the tank's front glacis, and it just managed to maybe set off a couple of the ERA blocks, which may be what caused that massive white plume. Like right there. Because if you look at the T-64BV in slow motion, you can see the ERA tiles right where my mouse cursor is circling, and they're also on the turret as well. And I'll pull up a picture of this to show y'all what I'm talking about. T-64BV. So let me go to images, and here's a good picture of one. So as you can see, there's the ERA tiles. And ERA, just for some of my viewers who may not know what that stands for, ERA stands for Explosive Reactive Armor. And so these things, when hit by any kind of projectile, they explode. And that explosion is projected outwards towards the projectile, and in theory, it's supposed to moot it, or make it less potent than it would be if it just hit, dead on onto the plating on the tank. Then under that ERA tile on a T-64, there's something called composite armor, which is a mixture of different kinds of elements. It's a composite, and it in theory, against any kind of projectile, specifically high explosive anti-tank or armor piercing APFSDS, we'll just call it that. it's supposed to be able to stop that as well. And so you have a double layer of armor there. And now I've never actually seen one of these ERA blocks explode and have proof of what they look like when they do. I would pull that up, but I want to save everyone some time because I'd have to do some research on it. But these things will explode when they're hit. That's what they're made for. And the thing is that if this tank was hit, and we've seen dozens of Russian tanks, hundreds of Russian tanks get hit before on the stream, to know what a direct hit that actually punctures the hull looks like. We almost immediately see gray smoke and some kind of fire directly afterwards when we see the tank in an inferno. We never saw that in this video. So I think that this tank actually survived the hit because the Russians didn't show us this tank burning. They showed it getting hit right here. Let me get to that part. They showed it getting hit, but they never showed any gray smoke coming out of it, which lets me think that the tank may have been hit. Maybe the crew abandoned the tank after the hit, but the tank wasn't destroyed. So I'm going to stick with my guns on that one because we don't have any hardcore evidence to show that that tank was actually knocked out. So while the LPR did hit that tank with an ATGM, they may have not knocked it out, and it was just cheap Russian editing and not really showing us the full picture that would lead one to assume that that was a Ukrainian T-64BV that was destroyed. So with that, we have now covered all of the Luhansk news, and funnily enough, nothing has come out of the Popasna Finger again today. The Popasna Finger has come to a dead standstill, and this was supposed to be the most promising axis of Russian advance in this area, and it was going to cut off Severodonetsk and Lysychansk from supplies nearly entirely, which would have helped the Russians to push the Ukrainians out of that city, and was pretty much the linchpin to ensuring that this entire bulge here in the Ukrainian lines would have collapsed. And now it's fallen completely silent. They haven't been able to make any progress, and the Ukrainians have held them back for weeks on end at this point. So great to see. And of course, that ensures that the rest of this front will most likely be able to carry on and keep the struggle of holding the Russians back and fighting for every bloody inch of ground that the Ukrainians still hold. And so with that, we're now going to start moving down towards the Donetsk region and start covering the Donetsk news, the Southern Front news, also a little bit of news down here that a lot of y'all will most likely be looking forward to, our international news, and then the speech from Zelensky. But before we get to those, we're once again going to take a quick pause to answer 3 questions from the chat, and once we answer those 3 questions, we're going to be back on the road again, covering the remainder of the news for the night. And so with that, what is our first question?
All right, and first up from the live chat, or excuse me, from the super chats, we have a $100 donation from DC Williams, who says, "This is actually my 3rd live day. Just to get it straight, you all present a heart, some of which is happening in the war.
A 3-hour
Add the
sum?
pre-show, the 3. Oh, is that what that says? Okay, 3 hours, some of which is
Heart
happening
sum.
in the war. Add the pre-show prep time, and you're straight out burning the wood. I appreciate the one place, one-time aspect of your coverage, and thank you."
Well, I thank you so much for the support, DC Williams. It helps us out a great deal, and we're super appreciative for it. Everyone who supports us helps this channel to keep running, and massive support like that always makes sure that we will be able to keep on running these streams, and I got to thank you so much for it. And also, I thank you so much for appreciating the amount of time and effort we put into this stuff. It takes me about 4 hours of prep time to make this thing, and then on top of that, it takes about 3 hours to actually run it. And so it's in its own right about 7 hours long, and then adding in making the summary every day, that's about another hour, and then overlooking some things and working on others in the background, like changing out the music and also making new Morse code, that adds in time too. And so I thank you so much for appreciating all the efforts we go through to try and make sure that this news is all in one place and one time, and I honestly like that. I feel like news like this should be covered in this way all over the world. Like if something happens, where whatever it may be, even if it's 24-hour news, cover it in a 2-hour segment. Give it a little bit of time to get as much information as you can, cover it all, and then move on. And I feel like that's the best way to do news. So I thank you so much for the support, and I'm glad that you do enjoy how we run this channel. And of course, it's cool to hear that this is the 3rd time that you've been here live. And that's really cool, honestly. It almost seems like some people make it a pilgrimage to make it to the stream live, and honestly, that's really cool. And so I thank you once again, DC, for the support. It helps us out a huge deal, and we're more than appreciative for it. It means a lot to us, and of course, it helps this channel to keep running. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question. I got to thank you so much once again.
And next up, we have a $45 donation from A. Crawford, who does not leave a comment, but thank you very much, A. Crawford, for that very generous donation.
Well, thank you very much, A. Crawford. And when I heard that support, I was thinking, hey, Crawford. So I guess that's what your name means. Just all kidding aside, I do thank you so much for the support, and it helps us out a lot. Sadly, you didn't attach a question. I would have tried to answer it if you did have one, but of course, the support is very important to us and helps us out a massive deal. And so I got to thank you so much once again. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the last super chat of this segment, and then we're going to move on to the rest of the news for the night and get to everyone's live chats at the end of the news, and then answer some live chats after that. Hopefully I didn't say the live chats twice there. I think I may have. And so with that, we're on to the last question.
All right, and moving on to the last question, we have a $20 donation from none other than Kaltenberg, who everybody should know by now is a channel legend, who says, in for the win and Slava Ukraine.
Well, I thank you so much for being in for the win, and hopefully that win will come sooner than later. While it's been a joy to grow this community, and of course, have an entire culture really surrounding us with the jokes and everything that we have at this point, and everyone's saying "stand for the anthem" at the beginning of the streams, and the music and the Morse codes and all that stuff. I would like for this war to come to an end sooner than later. And so I hope that you'll be in for the win, and that won't be too long from now, maybe 2 months or so, hopefully. But then again, who knows? But I thank you so much for the support, Kaltenberg. You've been around every single night, and you're always helping to support this channel, and it's always greatly appreciated, and it always helps us to keep running. And so thank you once again. It does mean a lot to us, and support like that always helps us. And so with that, we've reached the end of this question segment. If you have sent in a live chat or super chat, or if you're going to send in one, do not fret. We do get to all of them by the end of the stream, and I always want to make sure to mention that every single time, because some new people who may have just super chatted may have never heard that spill before, and so when I only answer 3 questions and theirs isn't answered, I want to make sure that they don't feel like they just got gypped or something. We will get to all of them by the end of the night, so just stick around, and we will make sure to get to it. But with that, we're now going to move on to the rest of the news for the night, and I highly suggest call up your friends, call up your family. This may have not been what the thumbnail was about tonight, but oh buddy, we've got news on the Kerch Bridge, and it looks like something's about to happen there. So we're going to cover that here in a second. We're of course going to go through all of the Southern Front news up here first, but this is something that's about to be massive. And so I highly suggest y'all stay on and listen in for that, and also bring your friends on too, because that's about to be big news. Anyways, we're now going to move on to the news from Severodonetsk, where today we've seen rockets in flight. We've never seen a video like this before, and this is something brand new for all of us here on this channel. This video was taken in infrared, and you're about to see a video here of the ground. And you're going to see these little things flying past that look like tadpoles in the stream. These are rockets. Every single one of these little black dots you see flying into the distance are all rockets fired from an MLRS. Hundreds of them, just flying past this camera and into the foggy distance, and we're about to see them all start hitting the ground and exploding. And now we see them all hitting their target. MLRS barrages are common on this channel. We've seen hundreds of them. There's nothing new about this video in its own right, rather than the fact that we actually saw the rockets in flight on this film. And when you see it like that, this brings me back in my head to something like the Battle of Agincourt, and seeing arrows fly from English longbowmen down towards the French. I mean, like, no matter how far war comes, in the end, it always looks a little bit similar to what used to be. And this MLRS barrage looks very identical to an arrow barrage in the medieval ages, or even a hail of gunfire, or a hail of cannon fire, really, from, say, the Napoleonic era. And it's crazy to see this in infrared, because you can actually see it with your own eyes, what these barrages look like, and how the rockets actually fly. It just looks like an arrow barrage, but these things are 127 millimeters in diameter, and they create about a 50-yard wide explosion when they hit the ground. And so while this is a Russian MLRS barrage, this is probably one of the most interesting videos we've ever seen showing the rockets in flight. Actually, it's the only one. And with that, we're now going to move further down the front, but that was a crazy video, and I had to show it just for the fact that it actually showed those rockets. With that, we're now going to be moving down towards the area of Orlivka, where today we can actually see Russian tanks firing at New York. That's right, they're firing at New York. But just for y'all to know, it's not New York, USA. It's New York right here. Apparently, the Ukrainians named a town New York, and it's literally pronounced New York. So, very interesting, but we can see tanks from the Russian side firing at New York, which is really weird to say. And here's the video. We see the Russian tanks hitting this building, but once again, we don't see any Ukrainian soldiers in it. So we don't have any hardcore verifiable proof that the Russians are actually targeting anything that actually exists. Once again, based on either side, we have to see the enemy forces at some point to confirm that they are actually firing at something. And so for all we know, the Russians are firing at an empty building. But they are firing at buildings in New York nonetheless, and we will keep an eye on that situation, as it does appear that the fighting has been going on there for quite some while. New York as a village came up a long time ago, about 2 months or 3 months ago at this point, as a city that was being attacked by the Russians, and the Ukrainians, of course, have never yielded and have never given up the ground. And so we'll, of course, look at that a little bit more, but that's one of the first times we've gotten a video from New York. With that, we're now going to move down towards the area of Avdiivka, where we could see a helicopter get shot down in the Donetsk Oblast. Now, y'all may remember the little glimmer and gleam of a man pad in the very first 2 weeks of the war as it slammed into the side of an Mi-35 in the northern front, and it came crashing down into the fields outside of a village, emblazoning this video for the whole entire world to see that Ukraine had a chance, and they were actually fighting against the Russians and destroying their forces. Today we saw that exact same video unfold in a different area of the country, again, as the Ukrainians managed to shoot down another Mi-35 with a man-pad. This was actually fired down by the Azov battalion, and we can see the helicopter moments before its demise here in this video. Here we see the helicopter flying over a lake, and of course it's about to do its usual tactic of firing off some flares, and we can see what appeared to have been a man-pad fired at it right then, but it appeared to have missed just by a hair. We'll go back and take a look at that again. Right there, you saw it come flying in, and it missed it by a little. And so the helicopter got away unscathed at that moment. You now see the helicopter taking a bit of a right bank back over the fields. We now see the camera trying to find the second helicopter that's flying back in the direction of where they came, back over the lakes. We now see this helicopter taking a sharp right turn and trying to stay as low to the ground as possible. But I'm about to key y'all in on a little bit of a secret. Being low to the ground did not save these Russians from a quick demise. We can see that it tilted up for a second. We didn't see it fire off any rockets. It's now once again hitting the ground near the field. And it's about to lift up to try and fly over a line of trees. And right when it does that, it meets its end. You can now see it tilting up to get over the tree line. And boom. It gets hit. The helicopter begins to go off control. It keels over and slams into the ground. The entire crew was killed instantly. Once again, another Russian helicopter taken out, and it was literally the exact same as the first video we saw within the first 2 weeks of the war of that Mi-35 getting shot down in the, I believe, Chernihiv area. And it's so eerily similar, it's like it's just demanding that you go and remember the very beginning of the war, when seeing that helicopter get shot down was a massive feat. A lot of people thought Russian helicopters were invincible at that time, like the Ka-52s and the Mi-35s, and everyone thought that they were gunships, flying tanks, as a matter of fact. The Ukrainians thought they were invincible. And we saw the first Russian helicopter get lost on the very first day of the war as a Ka-52 ditched in the fields near Kyiv, and then 2 weeks later we saw an Mi-35 get slammed in the side by a man-pad and go down just like this. an incredible video, a second one just like the first, and it never gets any less great to watch. It's even better the second time. And so with that, we're now going to be moving out of that area, and we're now going to be moving out of Donetsk as a whole. There hasn't been a lot of news coming out of Donetsk. It's a very static and stagnant part of the front, but that's not special. Really, a large part of the front has become like this, literally from Lyman to Kharkiv, and from pretty much Orlivka down to Kherson. The entire front's fallen silent. Specifically for the Russians, the Ukrainians are still conducting counterattacks near Kherson, but we don't get a lot of information on those counterattacks, and it seems like every once in a while they do stall a little bit. And like today, we don't get any news of that. We're now going to be moving down to Mariupol. Mariupol's been a city that we've talked about a lot on this channel. Loads, actually. And it's been the constant, I guess you could say, ire for attention. And it's been infamous attention as well, as about 50,000 civilians have been killed in that city alone. And the Azov and the 36th Infantry Brigade put up their glorious last stand in the Azovstal steel plant. After all this was said and done, the citizens of Mariupol have been left without water, very little electricity, if they even get electricity at all. Food's running out, there's really no food left, and people are living in absolute squalor and hell. Meanwhile, the Russians are building their vacation resorts already. They've begun a special operation of their own kind, a special construction operation. And so we're going to go and watch this video. Hopefully it doesn't black out on us because it appears that there's no Reddit link for me to go to. So hopefully this doesn't black out. It just did. Oh my god. Let me try and get to Reddit. I mean Twitter, sorry, correction. Let me see if I can scroll down to this one. There we go. There it is. This is according to a Russian news organization. They're already breaking ground on the first apartment buildings.
Стройка с момента освобождения города от украинских националистов началась в Мариуполе. Работы ведутся специалистами из России на территории бывшего рынка Азовский. Там планируют возвести целый жилой квартал. Это 12 пятиэтажных домов с магазинами и поликлиникой. Стройкой занимается Минобороны России. Для этого в город прибыло 50 единиц спецтехники и более 200 работников. Их число планируют увеличить в 5 раз.
Over the same land that tens of thousands of people just died in, and hundreds of thousands of people are suffering in because they don't have basic tenets to support human life, pretty much.
На объекте ведется практически без остановки. Первые жилые дома планируют сдать в эксплуатацию уже этой осенью. Сейчас строители закладывают котлован под фундамент первого дома.
В состав пятиэтажных жилых домов будет входить 1015 квартир. Также в 3 жилых домах на первых этажах будут аптеки, магазины, парикмахерские. Предусматривается сдача первых 6 жилых домов до 1 октября этого года, 6 жилых домов и поликлиники до 1 ноября этого года.
Параллельно с этим в Мариуполе идет возведение временных модульных жилых домов. Они будут готовы уже в этом месяце. Собирают их из бетонных блоков, которые изготовили в Москве. В республику таких доставили 60 штук. Этого хватит на постройку 5 домов. Один из них оборудуют под штаб строительства, остальные смонтируют под городок для переселенцев.
Мы переселяем из разрушенного жилья во временное сооружение жителей.
You now see this guy talking about some kind of prefabs and whatnot. We saw them showing the destroyed city of Mariupol just a second ago. Of course, we don't know exactly what they're saying, but based off of the captions, this is definitely in Mariupol. And they're literally, right after they took over the city, they're already bringing in construction crews to make this like vacation beach resort that we've heard in rumors, and I never really believed. Until we actually see them trying to make it come to fruition now. And they're not even waiting for the war to conclude. They're acting like they're going to stay here permanently.
Включая электричество, воду, канализацию, отопление.
Чтобы отстроить город, в Мариуполь по распоряжению Минстроя РФ прибыли сотни специалистов. Их разместят в палаточном лагере на территории бывшего торгового центра. Сейчас занимаются возведением палаток. Разместить на территории бывшего ТЦ планируют 1500 специалистов. Екатерина Шиндина, телеканал «Оплот».
A sickening video, a sickening display of Russian arrogance and confidence, and just their disregard for their own people even. Their people are starving as well. They're running out of wheat and basic foods, and yet they're going to spend their economic activity, the remaining that they have left, pretty much doing a propaganda stunt in Mariupol as they try and build apartments for this wonderful vacation beach resort here in the future. And on top of that, Isn't it supposed to be going to the DPR or the LPR? Why are the Russians planting their flags in Mariupol and building these apartment buildings in the hopes of having a Russian beach resort? That means they're not even going to give this over to the DPR and LPR. The DPR and LPR might be on their final legs. They might get annexed into the Russian Federation here soon. And so not only are the Russians using them right now for meat shields in the Donetsk region, soon they're going to completely dissolve their government and make them lose their own free will, the little they have, so that way this can become Russia's perfect little paradise that they cost hundreds of thousands of lives to take. Honestly insane to me, and it's unbelievable that the Russians are actually trying to carry this through. Apparently the goal is to finish by November 1st, according to the caption on this Twitter post. With that, we're now going to move out of Mariupol. Hopefully, the Ukrainians can take Mariupol back or get it back before the Russians can actually complete those projects. Well, hopefully the Russians will complete those projects and the Ukrainians will get them back. So that way they'll have some brand new apartment buildings to move some of these poor people who are living in Mariupol and squalor into. With that, we're now going to be moving towards the front line south of Zaporizhia and near the village of Polohi, where we've seen 2 BMPs get wiped out again today by Zhytomyr paratroopers, which have been moved to the southern front. We can now see the BMP-2s moving in the distance, but the Stugna will ensure that they no longer move. We can see that the first Stugna has already hit the BMP and knocked it out. It continues to drift on for a ways, but we can see it slowing its roll and finally coming to a gradual stop as the crew simmers inside. We can now see it fade into the second image, where we can see a BMP-2 in a very open field, no support whatsoever, some infantry wandering around outside, and it looks like their wonderful picnic has now been interrupted. Another BMP destroyed, and another Russian vehicle that will never be used against the Ukrainians again. Once again, great to see, and it's always wonderful to know that the Ukrainians are always inflicting casualties on the Russians anywhere they go and whatever they try and do. We're now going to move out of this area of the front, which has largely been static and quiet for weeks on end at this point, as the Russians have lacked the ability and the foresight to actually control multiple fronts at the same time. We're now going to move into the area of Kherson, where a Ukrainian counterattack has been ongoing for quite some while. And it looks like today there was a little bit more progress as the 28th Brigade counter-batteried a Russian Mitsubishi artillery unit and wiped out at least one of the pieces. Here we can see these Mitsubishi in the field, and we can see that this one over here on the left side has been turned into Reese's Pieces. Great to see, and hopefully the Ukrainian counterattacks continue on with great fervor. I did see a picture today, didn't include it in the news because we have a lot of bulletins to cover, and it's already 11 o'clock and we're still going over the news. But we did see that the Ukrainians can actually see Kherson now from just taking a normal picture. You can actually see some of the higher rise buildings in Kherson from where the Ukrainian front lines are right now. So they are just a few miles away from the city at this point. With that, we're now going to move out of the southern front, and we're going to move on to the news that I just told all of your friends and family to get on for. And I'd highly suggest you call them all around, because it's the thing that everyone's been asking about, everyone's been wanting to know about, and we haven't had any answers about it for weeks, if not a month. The Ukrainians have gotten information on the Kerch Bridge and how it was built and how it's actually structured. And according to the Ukrainians, they're planning on an attack, and they've said that publicly. Here on this post, we can actually see someone say, let me make sure I'm getting this correct. This was from the Kyiv Independent. Ukrainian intelligence has obtained detailed specifications of the Crimean Bridge's construction, its layout, and its linking of both peninsulas. They're apparently getting ready to target and destroy the Kerch Bridge. Not only that, but there was another Twitter post that came out today showing us the exact blueprints and maps that they gathered on the Kerch Bridge's construction, how deep the beams are, and such things like that. So let's go to that Twitter post and take a look at each of them. Here we can see, of course, a standard map showing where the Kerch Bridge is that links Russia to Kerch. In this next picture, we can then see, let me try and get on it. It looks like a cross-section of the bridge's support structures. I'm not exactly sure. I'm not really an engineer. But we're now going to move on to the next picture. And this appears to be showing the Kerch Strait and how deep it is at its deepest point, and some other information about how the bridge may have been constructed. Finally, in this last one, We can see some more schematic drawings, of course, showing a little bit more about how the bridge is most likely constructed and how it operates. This appears to be a cross section of the bridge, showing the multiple lanes on it, and maybe some other attaching road. I'm not really sure. Of course, I'm not an engineer. I don't know what these blueprints are actually showing, but this is what they got today, and they've already published it. This was supposed to be kept top secret by the Russians and their Ministry of Transportation, I believe, because this bridge is considered a strategic asset to the Russians. Somehow, the information got out to the Ukrainians, and they're now eyeballing actually destroying this bridge. We've said time and time on this stream again that it would most likely be impossible for the Ukrainians to destroy this bridge, but if they did, it would cut off most of the Russian southern armies from their major supply links. Even with a land bridge going across the southern part of Ukraine, if all of their supplies had to go through that one area, it would most likely become overcrowded, and their supply efficiency would drop greatly. By cutting off that bridge and destroying it, the Ukrainians are pretty much going to be guaranteeing their own victory. Y'all may have heard something just fall. And that was my phone, because I keep it on my lap to check for things in the middle of the stream. So, with that, it's great to know that the Ukrainians have finally gotten this specific information about the bridge, and I pray that we'll see this bridge burning and falling into the middle of the Kerch Strait within weeks. With that, we've now covered all of the news from inside of Ukraine, and it's time for us to delve beyond Ukraine's borders and go to all the countries around the world, which we've seen a massive new wave of support being given to Ukraine. Starting off in Slovenia, we've actually seen that Slovenia has pledged 35 infantry fighting vehicles of their own to Ukraine. These appears to be based off of the BMP chassis, but it appears that they did a large amount of modifications to it, as this is certainly not a standard BMP. I don't know what the specific name of this is, but 35 of these will most likely help the Ukrainians a great deal, give a little bit of infantry support, and also an extra deal of transportation for maybe a Ukrainian sized battalion tactical group if the Ukrainians were to organize their forces in such a way. With that, we're now going to move on from Slovenia, and we're now going to move on to Britain. Now, a lot of people gave me smoke last night during the live chat, because I said that every country in the world, in comparison to the United States, has hardly done as much. While that is still true, when you look at it and you actually break down the spreadsheets and the figures, the British are, of course, giving support, and everyone does get credit, and of course deserves some respect for the amount of support they're giving, although I wish that everyone in the world would give a whole lot more. That includes the United States, Britain, Germany, France, Norway, and every other NATO country. But regardless of that, we've seen that the United Kingdom has pledged to give 20 more M109s to Ukraine. We can actually see a picture of that specific vehicle, of course not the ones that are being sent over, but these are the SPGs that the Norwegians have already sent, and also the Americans have sent, and now we see the British sending over another 20. Hopefully those make it to the front line soon, and hopefully they help out the Ukrainians that little bit extra. We can see that a lot of countries are starting to nickel and dime their inventories to give over as much heavy artillery as possible, and another 20 M109s is a massive improvement to Ukraine's artillery situation. Now, as usual, it's time for us to cross the Atlantic Ocean, across the mighty seas, to the United States of America, where we've gotten two bits of news today. Starting off, we've actually seen that a company called AeroVironment has sent 100 drones to Ukraine. These are going to be used for reconnaissance and surveillance, and apparently some of them are already being used on the battlefield. There's one of the drones right there. So huge credit to the company AeroVironment. Hopefully those drones can be put to good effect, and hopefully will help the artillery to be that much more accurate like they usually are, setting the gold standard for accuracy around the world. In our next bit of news, we've actually seen that the United States Department of Agriculture has lended a hand to the Ukrainians. Based off of this post, which came directly from the United States Department of Agriculture, which we will click on here, they are going to be giving massive amounts of support technologically, intellectually, and maybe even monetarily to the Ukrainian agricultural sector to ensure that they can help themselves in ensuring that a food shortage does not occur around the world. The food shortage that will be in question, if it was to happen, will affect Ukraine directly, the Middle East, and also Africa. It seems largely that Russia's attempt at this food shortage is to try and hurt the Ukrainians directly, and the Middle East and Africa are kind of dragged along as indirect targets of this attack on their food supplies. It's great to see that the United States Department of Agriculture is going to be helping the Ukrainians try and get through this struggle, and hopefully with their efforts combined with the Ukrainians, they can try and skirt over this food shortage as best as possible, and if a food shortage does occur, it will be as minor as possible. With that, it's now time for us to travel once again back across the seas, all the way back to Ukraine, where we're going to listen to the speech from the man himself, the guy who's been there the entire time, doing as much as he can to help out his country, the guy who said, "I need ammunition, not a ride," and set the stage for what would be probably one of the most important wars in the 21st century. Here's the speech from President Zelensky.
Українці і українки, наші захисники, захисниці. Сьогодні справді історичний день. Україна відчула підтримку одразу 4 потужних європейських держав, зокрема підтримку нашого руху в Європейський Союз, Італія, Румунія, Франція, Німеччина з нами. Усі 4 лідерів, пан Драгі, пан Йоханніс, пан Макрон, пан Шольц, підтримують кандидатство для України. Звичайно, мають бути виконані всі відповідні процедури, мають долучитись усі країни, всі члени ЄС. Але на нашій зустрічі сьогодні був зроблений великий крок вперед. Для мене було важливим почути від лідерів і іншу фундаментальну річ. Вони погоджуються, що закінчення війни і мир для України мають бути саме такими, як їх бачить Україна, як бачить їх наш народ. Вдячні Італії за принципову політичну підтримку, макрофінансову та оборонну допомогу. Зараз маємо історично найкращі відносини. Я впевнений, що зможемо зробити ще дуже багато для наших народів. Вдячний Румунії за оборонну допомогу, за сприяння в транзиті наших товарів, зокрема зерна. Домовились збільшувати експортну спроможність через територію Румунії. Франція надасть додаткові артилерійські установки «Цезар». Це дуже важливо для нашої армії. Також сьогодні президент Макрон відверто говорив про те, що європейська підтримка України має бути такою, щоб дійсно відчувалося, що ми разом захищаємо однакові цінності, захищаємо Європу. Німеччина підтвердила надання засобів протиповітряної оборони для нашої держави і подальшу підтримку. До речі, коли сьогодні 4 лідери приїхали у Київ, це співпало з початком повітряної тривоги. Росія створила такий фон, щоб всі чули ці сирени, щоб зробити напружену атмосферу, але ніхто не злякався. І це тільки ще більше надихало нас бути максимально конкретними, домовлятися заради наших інтересів, заради всіх українців, заради всіх в Європі. Подякував сьогодні і вже особисто канцлеру Шольцу за запрошення на зустріч лідерів групи 7. Загалом моє враження від зустрічі позитивне. Усі лідери розуміють, чому зараз не відбуваються переговори щодо закінчення війни, виключно через позицію Росії, яка намагається тільки залякувати усіх в Європі і продовжувати руйнацію нашої держави, не шукати шлях до миру. Вони не хочуть. Це агресор, він повинен визначитись для себе передусім, що війну треба завершувати. Ми ж продовжимо боротись, поки не гарантуємо нашій державі повну безпеку і територіальну цілісність. Говорили сьогодні про підготовку нового санкційного пакету проти Росії. Говорили про подолання продовольчої кризи, яку спровокувала знов-таки Росія. Поновити експорт української агропродукції життєво необхідно для десятків країн. І є тільки одна причина, чому продовольча криза взагалі стала можливою. Ні винна Росія, ніхто більше. Всі лідери це вже визнають. Говорили про відбудову України після війни, маємо дуже конкретні погляди партнерів на це. Вважаю, що зовсім не випадково саме сьогодні відбулось загострення ситуації з газом в Європі. Ціна знов стрибнула, Росія спеціально обмежила постачання, щоб нашкодити всім Європі, щоб вдарити по європейцях. Газпром просто смикає за газовий ланцюг, в який дуже довго намагалися закувати Європу. І це ще один аргумент на користь того, що Європа вже зараз має переходити до життя без російського газу. Не повинно бути цієї залежності. Завтра, післязавтра також буде багато новин для України. Я вірю, що позитивних, дуже вірю. Вкотре підкреслюю, що все це можливо передусім завдяки нашим героям, завдяки кожному і кожній, хто захищає нас від російських військ. На сьогодні українська армія бореться в умовах значної кількості переваги ворога в техніці, в артилерійських системах. Воювати в таких умовах – це щоденний подвиг. Ми робимо все, щоб дати нашим героям сучасну і потужну зброю. Я пишаюся усіма, хто вже 113-й день повномасштабної війни стримує окупанта і відбиває всі атаки. Саме завдяки хоробрості українців, Україна, Європа може створювати цю нову історію свободи і нарешті прибрати на сході Європи сіру зону між ЄС і Росією. Україна наблизилась до Євросоюзу, найближче за увесь час незалежності. Вічна слава усім, хто воює за Україну. Вічна пам'ять усім, чиє життя забрали ці окупанти. Слава Україні!
And with that, that was the end of President Zelensky's speech for the day, and that wraps out our day 113 news of the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine. Of course, another 24 hours of an incredible defense by the Ukrainians. I would say it's glorious, but that seems somewhat cliche. I thank you all once again for watching the news. If you were here for the news segment alone, then this stream has practically ended for you. But for the rest of you who are here for the question segment, the fun has just begun, and we're about to get to it here in a minute. If you are new to the stream and you do like what you saw, and you did like the news, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We do run these streams every single night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, covering the past 24 hours of the war, and we do this every day of the week, except for Mondays. We also upload daily summaries as well, at around 4 hours before the stream, that show some of the highlight videos of the day and give a slight rundown of what happened on the front lines. Thank you all once again for watching, if you were here just for the news, and we're now going to begin the question segment, where we're going to answer all the super chats that have been sent in for the night, and we're also going to answer as many live chats as we can. And so with that, we are now going to move on into our questions, and what do we got, Matthew?
And first up, before we move into our first super chat question, I just want to say to everyone, thank you for your support of the channel, both through super chats and just from your kind words and compliments. Believe it or not, the kind words, we do read almost every single comment, so it helps us a lot. It helps improve our morale, and it helps us keep moving and doing these news streams. So, to get to our first super chat, we have a absolutely tremendous $300 donation from Steve2848. Steve, you're killing it, man.
Steve,
he
you're
says,
killing it.
congratulations. He says, congratulations on making it through another day of the news, and thank you for your dedication.
Well, I thank you so much for making sure that we can keep on doing this, because while I'm dedicated to this and promised I will do this till the end of the war, support like that ensures that we can keep doing this. And I got to thank you so much, Steve, because you come in here almost every day and help us to keep this thing running. Like, if we can count on anyone to help us out, we can count on you, Steve. And I got to thank you so much for that, because it means a lot to us. And it, of course, helps this channel to keep running. And so I thank you once again, Steve. It's unbelievable the amount of support we get from folks like you to keep this thing running. And it means a lot to us, along with everyone's kind words. Just like Matthew said before we started to read off super chats, the kind words alone help us to keep going, because you know, of course, every once in a while we do hear negative things, whether it be from bots or just insane people out there sending out death threats and whatnot. It will bring you down a little bit. And so it's always great to hear people greatly appreciate what we do. And we're so appreciative for the support we get in any kind, in any way, from everyone, because it encourages us to keep going. So I thank you so much once again, Steve. And it's unbelievable. You've done this so many times, and it's still as impressive now that you support this channel the way you do as it was the very first time. And so I got to thank you once again. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question. But I thank you again. I can't say it enough. Thank you.
And yes, thank you very much for that, Steve. That is absolutely tremendous. And moving on to the next one, we have a $30 donation from Uncle Tababite, who says, NBA champs, gold blood warriors for coffee or beer.
Read that one again.
He says, and just to be clear, folks, we really don't follow sports, so hopefully we're not missing something here, but Uncle Tababite says, NBA champs, gold blood warriors for coffee or beer.
I don't know. Yes, I don't follow sports a lot. If I had to say, I would go for coffee, because I don't really drink, but I would go for coffee. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the question at least in some way, but sadly, I don't think I follow enough sports to know really much about that. So with that, I hope that answers the question at least in a way, and I thank you once again for the support. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $20 donation from Gabriel Selru. Thank you very much for that. And I'm hopefully pronouncing that last name correctly. I think it's Selru or Selarui. I'm not sure how to say it, but Gabriel, however it's pronounced, thank you very much for your donation to the channel, and thank you for supporting our efforts. And moving on, we now have a $20 donation from Super Creech, who says, Enforcers, hi, all any word on how the Terminator BMPs are doing and how many T90s are left for the Russias. Thanks, both of you. Hit me up with these sizes, and I'll send you out bugger shirts. Thanks again, and Slava Ukraine.
Well, thank you so much for the offer. And also, to answer those questions, we have not heard anything more about the BMPT Terminators, and we haven't heard about how many T90s are left. We know that about 120 T90s have been destroyed. I'm going off of the public figure. They have around 350 T90s, so that means at least 30 to 40% of their T90 force has been completely destroyed in Ukraine alone. And the BMPT Terminators, I haven't heard about any of them being destroyed, but I haven't heard about them doing anything either. And so I think that may have been a propaganda stunt, and that only, because we haven't seen it turn into much of anything else. So I hope that answers the question. I mean, like, I wish I could talk more about the BMPTs and what they're doing, but we don't have anything on them anyway, so that's about as far as the answer can go for now. But we will see if there is more news about them, reporting them here on the channel, because, of course, they had a lot of hype when they eventually arrived on the front, and as usual, in the typical Russian fashion, they all disappeared. So we'll try and get some more news on that, but for now, that's all we have on them. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're moving on to the next one. But thank you once again for the support.
And next up, we have a $20 donation from Smokey Valdez and a $20 donation from Greg Carmen. So thank you very much, Smokey and Greg, for your support of the channel. And thank you for being longtime viewers, because I've seen both of you around for quite some time, and we appreciate it very much. And moving on, we have a $20 donation from Michael Tichenuk. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that one correctly as well. Probably not, but anyways, Michael says, thanks to you and Matt.
Well, thank you so much for the support. And of course, I thank you so much for the kind words to me and Matt. We try our best to make sure that these streams are enjoyable to watch and very informative about what's going on in the war in Ukraine. I'm really more into making sure they're enjoyable. Well, Matthew's, of course, in that as well, but I'm into making sure that the streams actually exist and the information's here. I do everything with the map and collecting information, and then I try and make sure it's enjoyable through the news, how it's delivered, and everything in that regard. And Matthew also makes sure that it's hospitable within the live chat and kills probably more orcs than anyone else. He honestly ought to get a medal for that, because he's wiping out more Russian bots at this point than there are Russians in Ukraine right now. And so huge credit to him, of course, for keeping that live chat nice and free of Russian bots, and also the other bots as well that come through every once in a while. I'm sure one's about to pop up here any minute. But of course, thank you so much for the kind words and the support as well. It helps us out a lot, and it helps us keep on doing this. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question, and thank you once again.
All right, and next up, we have a $20 donation from Robin Hood, who says, for your streams and love, Slava Ukraine and Heroem Slava.
Well, thank you so much for the kind words and also the support to back it up. And also, Slava Ukraini, Heroem Slava. Hopefully, I'm trying to say that like President Zelensky, because he always has the same way of saying it. You know, he says Vichna Slava, you know, that whole entire thing, which I cannot pronounce. And then he goes, Slava Ukraini. And so with that, I hope that it addresses the comment. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And moving on to the next one, we now have a $20 donation from Ashley, who says, any further news on a naval escort to ship grain from Ukraine?
Not at the moment. We heard about, of course, there was the news that I didn't cover about the French fleet heading to the Black Sea, but we never heard about it making it there, and we haven't heard anything about it since. And so, as far as that's concerned, the answer to that is no. So I hope that does address the question. Of course, it's a very short answer, but there's not really a lot to elaborate on when the answer is no, so sadly, we haven't. But with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 donation from Just Lucky, I Guess, who does not leave a comment, but thank you very much for your support of the channel, and also you are a longtime viewer as well, so thank you for that also. And moving on, we have a $20 donation from BSG Wolf, who says, how likely is it that the U.S. or NATO troops will have boots on the ground in Ukraine? It seems Russia is getting desperate, and desperate breeds stupidity.
Now, the Russians are getting desperate, but they would never get desperate enough that the United States would get drawn in. And if the United States gets drawn in, the rest of NATO comes with them. I don't think that would happen, but if it was, if the situation was to arise where it would happen, I would say it most likely happen before mid-fall. So with that, I hope that kind of addresses the question, and hopefully it doesn't come to that, because if it does, that's World War III. So I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you very much once again for the support. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $20 donation from the legend BC Skyman, who says, Slava Ukraine and it's Red Bull time, my friends.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, and also for Red Bull time. Let me get rid of one Russian bot. I'm about to turn into Count or whatever it was on Sesame Street. One Russian bot. But anyways, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the support, and also I thank you for the Red Bull time. Now, I have had something similar to Red Bull. Never had Red Bull directly. I've had Monster energy drinks. And honestly, there's way too much caffeine in it. I feel my heart's about to seize. But of course, a lot of people do drink them. They're a very popular drink. And, you know, in that right, they're popular for a reason. It's just that I cannot handle that much caffeine. Well, like, it's not like I go hyper or anything. I just feel really sick. I get, like, hot sweats. Feel like my heart's about to explode. I just feel awful. But with that, I hope that does address the question. And I will have a Red Bull on you. I will suffer for the viewers. And so I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And I saw that Paul Plonsky said his name was the Count. And yes, I do remember that now that he said that. It was Count Dracula, the Count. So thanks for clearing that up. That was hilarious. Enforcer, pretty good one. And next up, we have an $18 donation from Justice, who says, thank you for all you do.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, and I thank you for appreciating the efforts we put in here on this channel. I try my best to make sure that we can get out the best news every single night, and I hope that I deliver every single time. And so I thank you so much for the support, and of course, for the kind words as well. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question. And so with that, one live chat down, And so with that, on to the next one.
And next up, we have an $18 donation from Martin Van Own, who does not leave a comment, but thank you very much, Martin, for the support. And next up, we have a $17 donation from Black Hawk NZ, who says, apparently first batch of Ukraine M270 crew have finished their training.
That's true, and that's why the M270s are being sent over, and the United States did say that they were done with their training. So hopefully those trained crews will arrive in Ukraine here in a moment with their M270s and begin to rain down hellfire on the Russian units, and the Russians will really have very few ways to respond to those artillery systems. Hopefully they'll never be destroyed. That's always a possibility. Nothing is ever infallible on the battlefield. Everyone thought that stealth aircraft couldn't be shot down until one F-117 got shot down over Serbia. So there's always the chance that anything can happen, and so hopefully they will be safe, the crews are well trained, and they'll be able to inflict massive amounts of damage on the Russian forces. And with that, I hope that addresses the comment, and I thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $17 donation from Rakehell8, who says, thanks for all you do, and Slava Ukraine.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, and also thanking us for everything we do, and also Slava Ukraini. And with that, I hope that answers the comment, and of course, I thank you so much for the support. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $15 donation from Peter Woofen, who says, please add this to your next fundraiser as us Aussies can donate to them. Slava Ukraine.
Well, thank you so much for the support. Matthew, can you tell me what the specific amount was so that way I can put that down in a reminder?
So I think it was 20 Australian, but I sort of mentally translated it to $15. I'm not sure if that's totally accurate or not, but it was 20 Australian.
Let's see. Let me put in 20 Australian dollars to US dollars. That's exactly $14.04. So let me put that down real quick. Hang on, everyone. I want to make sure that we put that in. 1404 to Sunday fundraiser. And then let me put down the reminder right before the stream on Sunday at my local time right there. And so I will make sure to add that in, but I would like to make a note to everyone, just to make it clear, please do not do that too much. I will make sure to honor it if it does come through, but YouTube does take 30% of the super chats. And so every time I do that, I'm actually taking a pretty decent loss. So please make sure not to do that, because if people did that in the thousands of dollars, I would go bankrupt. So with that, I hope that addresses the comment. We will make sure to add that to the Sunday night fundraiser. And with that, we are on to the next question. And I thank you so much for supporting the Sunday fundraiser in advance. It will be added. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have an $11 donation from Abacus, who says, life is about happiness, but men in U.S. groups inflict unhappiness into them groups. Evolution sucks, favoring selfishness before altruism. True education is only solution for awareness and ethic values.
Well, I thank you for the support. I don't really know what that's in context about, but I do thank you very much for the support. I honestly think people are pretty kind and pretty nice by and large. I think the Lee Spring Army kind of proves that through and through, because we've managed to raise $310,000 nearly just out of goodwill alone. And so I don't think that people are largely selfish, or else we would have never been able to do that. But I do thank you very much for the support. I hope that does address the comment in a way. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from William Arens, who says, Enforcer, what percent of Ukrainian territory do you think that the Russians will be holding after the summer offensive has reached its apex, and will that be their high watermark in this war?
I think that the Russians, by the end of the summer offensive, are going to be holding the same amount of ground they have now, if not just a little bit extra. I do believe that will be the high watermark, because right after the summer season, Rasputitsa comes around for the second time. And when Rasputitsa comes around, the Russians start taking massive casualties. So the Russians will, of course, be pushed back due to these casualties alone. They'll be taking massive material losses. And of course, they'll start losing ground just like they did in the Northern Front during the Rasputitsa season then. So I think that this will be the high watermark, and if I had to say the Russians could take any more ground, they're probably going to push the Ukrainians off of the hills near Lyman eventually, and also back from Oskil and towards the Severodonetsk River here. So with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you once again so much for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question, and I hope that did answer that question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Hoodoo, Texas, who says, we need to ask Patron if Macron passes the smell test.
We really do. That dog's become the most famous dog in the world. Dogs are really special, I think, because I have 2 corgis and I love them to bits. Every time we see them, we're like, oh, look at the little corgis, because they're just so precious. But I think that dog should give Macron the sniff test, and if he approves of Macron, then he's good. If he doesn't approve Macron, then we need to put him in jail. Of course, I'm just kidding around, but I do love that dog. It's a very sweet one. And so with that, I hope that addresses the comment, and of course, pretty good joke. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from William Allen, who says, it reminds me of my Freedom Bird home from Mazariah, Oman, to landfall at Bangor, Maine. People lined up, applauded, and shook hands and welcomed us home, all the way to the bar, and I will never forget that.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, and also, that's a really cool story to hear. And it's, could you actually reread the first part of that, Matthew? Because for some reason it got garbled when I just was talking about it right then.
So he said, reminds me of my Freedom Bird home from Mazira, Oman, to landfall at Bangor, Maine.
Ah, okay. I was just making sure. For some reason, I thought you said, like, Yemen. I was like, I don't think Americans were in Yemen ever, but I was like, let me make sure. But that is actually really cool to hear. And also, it's really great to know. It's always wonderful to know that here in the United States, people support veterans through and through. Now, whether the government actually helps them out afterwards, that's another thing. But compared to the Russians, the VA helps out veterans a whole load more than the Russians ever help out Russian veterans. So in that regard, of course, the United States is outdoing its rivals, I guess you could say. But in the other perspective, people here in the United States, no matter what's going on these days, always support the veterans. The only time they didn't was in the Vietnam War, and then after that, we've seen that pretty much everyone's become pro-army, I guess, pro-military, and they always support the soldiers, of course, especially when they're returning. And so I thank you so much for the support and also sharing that cool story. And we've seen a very similar story like that occur in that Kyiv train station today, which may be what you put that into context with. And I'm sure, although they have, of course, suffered grave bodily harm, like losing limbs and such things like that, they did feel like heroes being welcomed at that train station like that. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support and also sharing that little story with us. That was a really nice one. And with that, we're on to the next question. And it's here. Another one's arrived. Matthew, get it. Kill it.
That thing has been destroyed.
All right, Enforcer Matt has taken down another bot, this time a cam bot. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And I have to say it for the record, that is the third time it has visited tonight. So, good job, you Cambot, but you have been eliminated once again. So, up next, we have another $10 super chat from William Allen, who says, beer and wine were a replacement for water in ancient history. Why? The water sources were mostly polluted. I laugh at enviros wanting to go back to the natural ways.
Well, and thank you very much for the support. I don't know about the enviros trying to go back to the natural ways part. I don't really know a lot about, like, things like veganism and stuff like that. I mean, it's like, it's just a thing out there, and I don't really focus on it much. But to talk about beer and wines and such things like that, that's very true. Fermenting alcohol kills pathogens and bacteria in the water. And so it was very common back, especially in the older times, for people to pretty much just be raised to drinking alcohol because it was really the only safe thing to drink. Drinking normal water was almost always a death sentence throughout most of history. And so, of course, it was just common to just drink fermented alcoholic stuff all the time. But as the modern world came around, water actually became drinkable, which was the most surprising thing. A very interesting story about where cholera was first found out to be in the water supply. It was actually found out to have been in the water supply in London, of all places, which was one of the largest growing metropolises in the world during the 1800s, the mid to late 1800s. They actually found it out because this one woman died in the outskirts of London, which is now in the middle of the city, and she had her daughter go to a specific well in the city and pump the water out of the well and bring it to her to drink because she said the water tasted sweet. They found out later on that the water tasted sweet because it actually had some excrement remains in it, which was making the water sweet, and also breeding cholera as well, which killed the old lady, along with many other people who were drinking from that very same pump. So that's actually where cholera was found out to have existed from, and at that time, water, while free, because, using a public pump was free, it was incredibly dangerous. And after they found that out, they started to do massive works to I guess you could say massive changes and renovations to the waterworks of London, which made them a lot safer to drink out of. It's unbelievable how long that went on without someone finding it out, and of course a genius at the time actually connected the dots and found out that cholera was being spread through the water and not through miasma, which is what most people believed at that point. So, of course, interesting, a very good observation, actually, William, and it's very true, of course, historically. And so with that, I hope that answers the question, and I thank you very much for the support. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And just real quick, I want to mention to those asking in the comments, it's actually a pretty good question. Some are asking, why can't we just ban the Cambot? And unfortunately, the Cambot is pretty wise. It changes its name just slightly every single time. So every time we ban it from the channel, it'll pop back up under a new name, and we're back through that 6 cycle again. So there's no permanent way to ban it, but it gives me something to do, and it's fun bot hunting. It's a pastime here on the channel, so everybody knows about it. Everybody loves it. So with that being said, we're moving on to our next super chat. Next up, we have a $10 donation from Jasper Weir, who says, do you think if Russia's invasion went better, that China would have been more bolstered to attack Taiwan?
I think they would have, yes, because if the invasion of Ukraine was successful and succeeded within a week, which showed that the Ukrainians were a pushover and also the West wasn't really going to do much to stop the Russians, the Chinese would have felt like they could have done the same thing with Taiwan. And we actually heard today, although I didn't cover this in the news, that the United States has reaffirmed the claim that the Taiwan Strait, which is this bit of water here in between mainland China and Taiwan, is an international waterway, and the Chinese cannot claim territorial rights over that water, over that area of sea. So, of course, that was very interesting to hear today, and I do believe that if the Russians had succeeded in their invasion of Ukraine, the Chinese maybe would have started eyeballing the invasion of Taiwan in the preceding months afterwards, like about right now. So with that, I hope that answers the question, and I thank you very much for the support. I hope I answered it in a fairly good way, and also in a short way, because sometimes I feel like I go down the rabbit hole so much, the answer is kind of lost amongst it. Also, look, Wuhan. Anyways, with that, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from Dark Metals, who says, "Thanks, gents."
Well, thank you so much for the support, and I thank you for appreciating what we do. Of course, it means a lot to us that you do support the channel, and of course, by supporting the channel, we continue to go on. And so with that, I hope that answers the question, and we're actually working on getting a video out eventually. Matthew's already got some of his footage that we shot that didn't have me in it ready to go. He'll send that over to me here soon, and then I'll finally start working on our first video that won't be on the Ukraine war. It'll be on something else entirely different. And so with that, we're moving on to the next question, and I hope everyone's looking forward to that, although that seems to have been in the making for months at this point.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Gary Robbins, who does not leave a comment. So thank you for your support, Gary. We appreciate it very much. And next up, we have a $10 donation from WL, who says, "Thank you."
And thank you for the support. It's, of course, I always say this every time, but we're always greatly appreciative for everyone's support, and it means a lot to us. And so thank you once again. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have an $8 donation from Olivia McCarthy, who says, "How do you think the Russian propaganda / disinformation campaign is faring in terms of twisting in the global media?"
What do you think that means, Matthew? Because I think I didn't really get it.
Let's see here. How do you think the Russian is faring? So they're asking basically, do you think the Russians are actually changing anyone's minds and twisting their opinions in the global media?
Yes, I do think I think that they are. I've actually run into some people around where I live that think that this whole entire war is something else. Just kind of like weigh y'all in. I actually heard someone say, "Don't you think it's weird how the Ukrainian government came to power right now, and they're, like everything went down just years before this?" And I was like, "Not really." I was like, it all makes sense. It's all a common sense kind of thing. But of course, there's a lot of people who think that there's some kind of a conspiracy theory going on behind this war. And I think that they're not really looking into it too much. And I think that sometimes people do that because they want to feel a little bit more intellectual, and they always want to discover something that's not just on the surface. But I promise everyone, I'm not old. I'm 20 years old. But I've been around long enough to know that things are pretty simple here in this world. Things are usually exactly what you're seeing. So, and of course, there's always the exception to that. There's always the exception to every single rule. But by and large, things are what you're seeing. And we've seen for years this situation developing ever since the conflict in the Donbass and the Maidan Revolution. And based off of that, I would have to say that there's nothing really going on further in this war, but the Russians are changing people's minds. There's a sizable group of people here in the United States, not sizable as in like it's half and half, but I'd say like 20 to 10% of the population believes that the war in Ukraine is trying to uproot some kind of a deep-seated corruption, elsewhere or something like that. So I hope that does address the question. I do believe the Russian propaganda is actually swaying some people, but I think that these people haven't been looking at the situation enough to actually know what's going on, and so the Russian propaganda gets to them first, and then they just go with that. So with that, I hope that does answer the question, and with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have another $10 super chat from William Allen, who says, "The Chinese will just build an island in the middle of the strait and then claim territorial waters. They did that in the South China Sea."
They did do that in the South China Sea, but the United Nations said that they're never going to recognize those stupid little islands. And on top of that, they build them on top of coral reefs. We can actually see, I think, one of them here. I think that the Pratis Islands. Let's pull that up. I'll tell y'all if that is one of the islands, Pratis Islands. Because they just use massive dredging machines, and they just create these things in the middle of the sea. So let me see if I can... Oh, wait, hang on. Let me back out. Pratis Islands. Google Maps. Let's see if we can get it on Google Maps. There we go. Hopefully Pratis Island. Nope, it's not on Google Maps. Wait a minute. Yeah, it is now. All right, so based off of this, this may be an island that is on a coral reef, perhaps. Now, I'm saying that as a perhaps. It may be. Let me go down here. Wow, this is a really chunky bit of like a satellite footage here. That's pretty rough. Where the hell are the islands that they've been making off the coast? They're incredibly small. I mean, like, they are minuscule at best. But they have been making those islands, but NATO, well, not NATO, the United Nations said they're not going to recognize the islands because the definition of an island or any geographical mass is that it has to be naturally made instead of artificially produced. And so they said that that was an artificial attempt for the Chinese to expand their territorial waters, and denied the claims that that was sovereign Chinese, I guess you could say, waterways. They would do the same thing in the Strait of Taiwan. If the Chinese were to start dredging, if there even is a spot where they could actually do that, where the Taiwan Strait is shallow enough, and dredge an island out of it, and then say that that's their territorial waters, the United Nations would just say, no, it's not, because you made the island, and it's not actually a legitimate, an island. So I don't think they would, the Chinese would do that, but they would fail at it. And then that would just cause, of course, the normal skirmishes we see, where they sit there and get on the radio, and you hear, like, this is Chinese Sharif, you're in Chinese airspace, Chinese waters. And then, you know, like, the Americans say, I'm here, you know, it's international airspace, I'm here by law. And then at the end of the call, the Chinese guy goes, meow, or something like that. It's always something weird, but that's what most likely would happen. By the way, just for some of y'all who don't know, Hong Kong is right here, and y'all may be thinking that Hong Kong is some kind of an isolated island, but just north of it is Guangzhou, which is one of the largest cities in China, and also Macau, which is right here, which used to be Portuguese, is right on the other side of this inlet. I just thought I would share that with y'all, just in case some of y'all didn't know where Hong Kong was, and this used to be the border in between British Hong Kong and China. And surprisingly enough, a lot of the Hong Kong citizens wanted to remain a British territory instead of becoming Chinese, and that led to a whole bunch of political rigmarole, but that's something for a video, and we'll cover that in the future. But I hope that kind of adds a little bit of interesting tidbit to that story about what the Chinese may be doing, and we might start covering that here in videos that we make in the future that are not about the Ukraine war, because it is an interesting topic that a lot of people are interested in. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question, but I hope that answers that one, and I thank you so much for the support. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And next up, we have an $8 donation from Murray Sutherland, who says, can we get a cheer for Zelensky in the live chat? And yes, Murray, we can. And if everyone would like to put Slava Zelensky in the live chat, I'm going to do that right now, and we will certainly accommodate you on that one.
And so if everyone could, please make sure to say Slava Zelensky in the live chat. Would be greatly appreciative, and of course, if anyone from the Ukrainian government is watching, it would be nice to show a sign of solidarity with them. And so, with that, I hope that addresses the question, and I'll also put in Slava Zelensky as well. Slava Zelensky. If Zelensky has taught us anything, it's lead by example. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question, and I thank you so much for the support.
And moving on, we now have a $7 donation from Junebug, the one without the 72 on the end. And we also have a $5 donation from Jose Diaz and a $5 donation from Martin Shara. So thank you very much to all three of you for your support of the channel. As always, it's very much appreciated. And moving on, we have a $5 donation from Nora S., who says, thank you for what you do.
And I thank you so much for the support and being a longtime viewer of this channel. It's always greatly appreciated that people do enjoy these streams and continue to watch them time and time again, and also join me as I cover the news every single night. I made a promise that I will cover this news every single day until this war is over. And God willing, as long as I'm able to do that, I will be here doing that until the very end of this war. And so with that, I thank you once again so much for the support. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And it looks like the live chat is absolutely blowing up with support for Zelensky, so that is definitely good to see. And moving on to our next super chat, we have a $5 donation from Nate R., who says, you guys are amazing and keep it up, Slava Ukraine.
And I thank you so much for the support, and I'm glad that you think we are amazing. I kind of think we're normal, but I'll take the compliment. But with that, I thank you so much for the support, and also, Slava Ukraini. And with that, we are on to the next question, but I thank you once again for the wondrous support that we get from our viewers. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $5 donation from Applied Cryogenics, who says, guys, what can we do to get Russia to seed to Finland. I'm convinced that this one move will get us exploring interstellar space before 2024.
Could you reread that one again? I think I lost it at the start.
He says, guys, what can we do to get Russia to cede to Finland? I'm convinced that this one will move us to get exploring interstellar space before 2024.
I don't know what we could do to the Russians to make them cede themselves to the Finns. I think the best thing we could do is tell them that if they're Russian to Finnish, then they'll join the Finns. So with that, I hope you enjoyed the puns there, and I thank you very much for the support. Also, by the way, speaking of interstellar space, I do believe that the Starship program is making pretty good headway, although I have not heard about that orbital test yet, which was supposed to happen some months ago. Let's actually type in Starship news real quick. I know this isn't Ukraine related. Let's see. Okay, so they just 3 days ago, they finally got that environmental approval from the EPA to be able to launch the orbital test from Boca Chica. So hopefully that'll be soon. That was supposed to happen months ago, but it never did due to the EPA stopping them. So now it'll be able to go on, and hopefully we'll see the Starship program make some progress. I think honestly that will be something crazy to see as a colony on Mars, and with Elon, anything's possible. So with that, we're going to move on to the next question, and I thank you so much once again for the support.
And next up, we have an $18 donation from Krister Peterson, who continues the trend by saying Slava Zelensky.
And Slava Zelensky, and I thank you once again so much for the support. And also, Slava Ukraini. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And next up, we have another $5 donation from Junebug, who says, Enforcer, Mr. Lunchtime, and all that vodka inspired me to create a perfect meme. And I put it in the Discord chat. Go Ukraine, and yeehaw!
You put your soul into that one, man. And I thank you
Yes.
I thank you so much for the support. And I will try and check out the meme if I do have the time here after the stream. But with that, I thank you so much for the support. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $5 donation from James Carroll, who says, the Russians that set up the bridge and wandered away will probably be sitting there getting drunk on vodka, USMC, and Semper Fi.
And I thank you so much for the support, and also Semper Fi as well. I've never served in the Marines, but I would like to say that, I just to let y'all know, I was in the JROTC, and when I was in high school, and oh my gosh, don't want to say bad things about people in particular, but sometimes the people who got into JROTC, it's I don't know what's wrong with you. Because some girl wanted to get into the Marine Corps, and she swore that if you didn't want to get in the Marine Corps, you can't say Semper Fi. She believed in that so much, she got in cussing matches with people about the Marine Corps over trivial things, which was it was insane. Honestly, JROTC was pretty rough to get through, not because of the program itself, but because of the people who got into it. And you would think every year, oh, well, this batch is leaving, hopefully it'll be over, and then the year before them would move up to Let 4, and then they would just continue it on, and that was rough. But beyond that, JROTC was pretty fun by and large. I loved the programs we did. Matthew and me were heavily involved in. We were both in JROTC at the same time. We had a blast doing that, but sometimes the people who got in JROTC were just something else. But of course, Semper Fi, and I thank you so much for the support. And with that, we're on to the next question. And also, I just want to say this to be clear. I'm not one of those future Army soldier kind of people. I was just in JROTC because I was thinking I could become an officer at that point, and then I found out I couldn't due to medical reasons. But with that, we're moving on to the next question, and I thank you so much for the support.
And next up, we get a dose of nostalgia from BSG Wolf, who puts in a $5 donation and says, nitric acid Coke break.
Oh, that's the first time we've ever heard that in an age. I thank you so much for the support, and we will get some nitric acid Coke. That was months ago at this point, because I remember it was the first time that the Russians had reached Rubizhny, and they hit the nitric acid Coke storage units. Oh man, that was forever ago, but I thank you so much for the support, BSG Wolf, and thank you for bringing up an old-time memory here on the channel. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question, and I thank you so much once again for the support.
And I guess that can commemorate the pulling out of Coke from Russia, and that probably coincides with that, and that was probably the reason he put that in there. So thank you very much, BSG Wolf, for the donation to the channel. And moving on to our next one, we have a $5 donation from Boston Dan 77, who says, I heard Starsky give a shout out to the Enforcer and the Loose Spring Army today on another YouTube channel.
Hey, well, that's very nice. Of course, Operator Starsky and us, we've run a couple of streams. Of course, he always comes on Sunday night fundraisers, because that's one thing I never want to do with guest stars is try and profit off of their appearance, because that seems very, very bad to me. So I always make sure they're on a Sunday fundraiser night. So that way, if any extra like support comes through in any direction, it's going to be directed towards a fundraiser and not towards keeping the channel running. So it's always been great to have him on. It seemed like he was very tired this Sunday, and a lot of people noted that as well. And it seems like he's been going through a little bit of a rough time lately with exhaustion. So hopefully he can get some sleep, get well rested, and get right back at it. Because of course that's crucially important. Hopefully he takes care of himself really well. But of course it's always fun to have him on, and it's great to hear that he did give us a shout out on another channel. And with that, I thank you so much for the support and also letting us know about that. And of course, we always wish Operator Starsky the best. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $5 donation from Diffuse56, who says, as yesterday, thank you guys for the incredible service you provide.
And I thank you so much for the support. We've heard that one multiple times tonight, but it never gets old to hear people say that they're thankful for what we do. We're always appreciative and very grateful that people enjoy what we do and also are willing to support us and help us to keep on doing this. And so I thank you once again. It means a lot to us, and that support helps us to keep doing this, so that way you can thank us for doing it. And so with that, thank you once again for the support. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from B. Dobson, who says, still a fan of your insight and is appreciated. Don't let the geezers fluff you. Jeep it up, kid. I'm a geezer, so... ...
Well, I thank you for the support, and I don't really consider people geezers, you see, because I do consider people young and old, but I do believe that most old people have an incredible amount of wisdom. There, of course, are exceptions to everything, and I've met some old people who are about as immature as an 18-year-old or a 16-year-old or even, a middle schooler. There are people out there like that, but of course, I consider everyone really all the same by and large, but I do consider older people to have a decent amount of wisdom, and a lot of people, I guess you could say, have walked, it's like a phrase from the Green Mile, walk that green mile and no one knows how long the green mile really is, if you remember the ending quote from that movie. Great movie, by the way. Very sad at the end, too, when John Coffey got killed. That was terrible, but anyways, I think that old people are very experienced most of the time and have a very niche thing that they live their whole entire lives doing. And when they get old, they know everything about it. And I think that they're experts and pros. You can see that as an example here every single night when the old Navy folks that used to be in the Navy when Morse code was taught decipher those messages within minutes. And I think that is something very good. And I've usually hanged around older people in my life, and that may have been what led me to act like how I act, because I never really hung out around, my upbringing was kind of weird. I never really hung around my peers in school. I kind of just went home and stayed to myself. And then a lot of times I just grew up around veterans. Not really family members. I had a lot of friends that were veterans that just lived on my street, or, I just knew. And I would sit around and ask them questions about their experiences in wars. And surprisingly, they usually told me more about what they did than their own family. I actually had a friend that I knew who served at Vietnam, and he died, sadly, from Parkinson's. And I went to his funeral, and everyone in his family said that he talked to me more about the war and what he did in the war than anyone else did. And I thought that was really weird and very touching in a way that he talked to me about it, and told me all of his experiences. And now I'm the only person really in the world who knows what he went through and can, pretty much carry on his stories. And that kind of is a bit of a thing that I always think about whenever I hear stories from people. It's like, wow, I may be the only person who's ever heard these stories. And, that's kind of why a lot of people think I have military experiences, because I talk so much about things that sound close to what someone in the military would say, and that's because I've heard it said by so many veterans so many times. It just sounds like what's going on, so of course I'm not saying that I have like some sort of special insight or anything. I've just heard a lot of veteran stories, but I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does address the comment. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one, and I thank you once again for the kind words and also the support as well. And no, you're not a geezer. You're just a normal viewer like everyone else, and I appreciate you for so much for just being here. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a super chat from Nidhi Agarwal, who puts in a 1,000 something. I'm not really sure what currency that is, and I'm not sure how to even translate it.
Matthew, you're not going to believe that is 1,000 rupees.
You said what?
That is 1,000 rupees. That is Indian currency.
Rupees.
Yes.
Oh, Indian currency. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Alrighty. So Nitty says, "Hey, Enforcer, how many years before World War III, and what is your guess?"
First off, I have to say, we've seen rupees before in here, but I think that's only the third time we've seen anyone give a super chat in rupees. So first, I want to give a shout out to India. We hardly know or hear about anyone from India in here, and it would actually be really cool to know where you're from. Usually I hear of people going to Punjab or usually down towards Mysore, I believe. I'm not going to say Mysore. I'm going to say like the south of India. I guess close to Bangalore. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, but it is really cool to see that we do have Indian viewers, and there's a massive viewer base on YouTube that is Indian. Surprisingly, like, Indian YouTubers have an entirely separate world here on the YouTube platform, but it is cool to see that it intersects every once in a while, and we do get Indian viewers here on the stream. So hello, and it's really cool to know you're on here. But to answer your question, how many years before World War III? I'm not really sure. Of course, I always give a disclaimer. I'm not entirely sure. But if things were to heat up and continue to heat up like they were at the start of this war when everyone thought the war was on the horizon, I would say it would most likely be within 5 years or less. I would give it a window of 5 years. It may happen in 3, perhaps, but at least 5. I'm not really sure if a world war would happen because, of course, everyone's always scared of the nuclear deterrence and mutually assured destruction, which stopped World War III from happening during the entirety of the Cold War. And so with that, I hope that answers the question, and I thank you so much for the support, and it's also cool to know that we have viewers in India who do enjoy these streams. And so thank you so much. It's really cool for me to get super chats from around the world and also hear people from around the world because I've heard of Japanese watching the stream, and I've heard of South Koreans and Norwegians and Germans and French and British and Australians and New Zealanders, but rarely do we ever hear of anyone from India. So I thank you so much for the support, and it's really cool to hear you're from there. And if you can, send me some Kashmir. And so with that, thank you once again for the support. I hope that does answer the question, and with that, we're on to the next one.
And I see multiple people in the chat saying that y'all thought the Enforcer said rubles, and I thought he said rubles at first too, and I was like, is that really someone from Russia? I can't believe it. But it turns out to be rupees, which I wasn't really sure what currency that was or where that was from, but it's good to know now. So thank you very much, Nitty, for that super chat, and we're moving on to the next one. The next one we have is from Anders Peterson, who puts in a $35 donation and says, cheers.
And I thank you so much for the support. And also, cheers as well. We will drink to that one, and of course, it helps to keep our channel running. And when I say we'll drink to it, root beer probably. And so with that, I hope that answers the question, and I thank you so much for the support once again. It's greatly appreciated, and with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from William Allen again, who says, when we have our Leaf Spring Army Victory Party in Mobile, maybe we can raise money to get Starsky over as a guest of honor.
Maybe so. Maybe. I think Starsky's working on that right now himself, but we will see. Actually, we're planning on going to Ukraine at the end of the war, if possible. I'm not saying that that's guaranteed. I'm saying if possible, but we're planning on going over there. So with that, I thank you so much for the support and also the idea and the suggestion. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $5 donation from Laszlo Uriel, who says, what is Turkey's current stance on access to the Black Sea? Which countries' commercial ships can and which countries' warships could? Hiram Slava.
Oh, I thank you for the support. And I believe that the Bosphorus Strait, if that's what you're talking about, has been completely cut off from all military ships right now. The Turks, of course, famously cut the Russians off from access to the strait. But we've also been hearing some slight reports that NATO countries may be barred from entering through the strait as well, which would be interesting to me because they are a member of NATO, and that would piss everyone off. But it may be something that they've done. But we haven't heard any news about any fleets entering or leaving through the Strait of Bosphorus. So with that, I hope that does answer the question. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of information to it because, like if no fleets are allowed to pass through, there's just nothing really to talk about. But I do hope that answers the question. And of course, I thank you once again so much for the support. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from Mark Cronin, who says, Bot Killer First Class Award for Matt. And thank you very much, Mark. I do try my best to get rid of the bots as quickly as possible. And thank you for that recognition and for your award there. So, with that being said, we're moving on to our next super chat. We have a $4 donation from CA Lags, who says, first, what did you think of music in English version? And second, Russian Widow, where's the washing machine?
First off, I think you may be from the Discord, and I did listen to that song, and honestly, I usually don't like. I usually like songs where I don't understand the lyrics because then I just get with the tune. So I did enjoy the song. The lyrics were good, but I really like the tune better. I'm not really one of those people who has to have lyrics to listen to a song. Usually, I just enjoy the lyrics of them and such, and that's why I listen to a lot of Ukrainian songs nowadays. But I have no idea what they're saying because I just enjoy the tune. And also that makes it really easy for me to go anywhere because I can go to, like, say Japan and they could be playing traditional Japanese music. I'd be like, oh, that's really nice. That's a really nice, like, tune they have going there. And I'm not really like, where's the lyrics, but I thank you so much for the support. And also, the washing machines, the Ukrainians are trying to get them back right now. It looks like the Russians got hit by the Maytag repairman, and it looks like they will be needing to give those washing machines back. And so with that, I hope that answers both parts of that question. And of course, I thank you so much for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Tim Q, who says, Slava Ukraine.
And also, Slava Ukraini. And with that, I thank you so much for the support, Tim. And of course, it helps our channel a great deal. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $4 donation from Murray Sutherland, who says, next time a bot comes online, get the listeners to give a cheer for Ukraine or Zelensky, etc. Let's them see it and kick them off.
Oh, they can see it. They get hidden, but that doesn't mean they're banned from watching. We've actually had multiple different people. We actually saw a very infamous one from the very start of this entire war pop up like 2 days ago. I'm not even going to mention their name, but Matthew knows who I'm talking about. It was within the first 10 minutes. It popped up. I said, oh, it's them again. And we went through a whole rigmarole back even before the Great Schism to figure out the story on this one, and it turns out there was no story to it, so we hid them, and then they tried to come back again, and their story was already different, so we went and hit them again. But they can still watch the streams. They're not allowed to comment, but they can watch them. So I hope that addresses that, because if everyone's just showing their support all the time in the live chat, even though they're hidden and they can't comment, if they're watching the stream, they can still see it. So with that, I hope that addresses the question, and I thank you once again for the support. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And moving on to the 50th super chat, we have a $2 donation from Applied Cryogenics, who does not leave a comment. So thank you very much for your support of the channel and your continued viewership. And moving on, we have a $2 donation from Chris Hoover, who says, keep up the great work, enforcers, 100, and thank you.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, 100, laughing face, smiling face, and I thank you so much for helping this channel keep on running. Of course, it does mean a lot to us, and without y'all support, we can't keep this thing going. And so it's greatly appreciated, and we count on every single one of y'all to help us to keep this thing going. And of course, you've pulled through and helped us to survive. And so with that, thank you once again, and I hope that does address the comment, and we're greatly appreciative for all the support we get. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Fiber Optic Cable, or actually just Fiber Optic.
Fiber Optic Cable. I just saw it come through.
I don't know why
like,
I added cable. I have no idea why I added cable to that. But anyways, sorry about that, Fiber Optic. He puts in a $10 donation and says, thank you for your constant reporting. It is super dedication.
Well, I thank you so much, Fiber Optic, and I greatly appreciate that a lot of people do enjoy that I keep this thing to a set schedule and a timetable, and I don't just run it willy-nilly. I actually saw... I've actually seen some streams out there that they just kind of run things like whenever. They're like, oh, I'll just upload something then or then. And they say it at the end of the stream and like no one's watching. And I'm like, I'm like, I wonder how people even keep up with this stuff because it just happens whenever, I'll skip this day or I'll skip 2 days and come back on like Wednesday. And I'm like, what? I'm like, I would never do that. Like, that would freak me out. Like, I would feel like I'm keeping people in the dark and stuff, but I thank you so much for the support. And I always want to make sure that this is a regular interval. And whenever I say stuff, of course, with streams or anything like that, I always make sure to try and telegraph it as far in advance as possible. Like when I started taking Mondays off for the first time, I said, hey, y'all, I'm going to be taking the Monday off. I said that for like 3 days, multiple times throughout the stream, and then I finally took them off, and then people knew what was going on. And then still, there were a few that didn't, but by and large, most people did. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I thank you so much for enjoying the dedication we go through to make sure that these things run every single night. And that also cuts out my nights from doing anything like just sitting back and watching TV or anything like that, because I start working at 4:30 p.m. Central Time, and I work until about 1 o'clock in the morning Central Time. So with that, I thank you once again so much for the support, and I hope that does address the question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have another $10 donation from Uncle Tabawite, who says, for spam masubi plus coffee and beer, thanks again for your updates. Go Ukraine, and all the best.
And I thank you so much for the spam masubi, and I thank you so much for giving those positive words to Ukraine and everyone who supports them. And so, with that, I thank you very much for the support, and Slava Ukraini. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from Vasily, who says, hey, bots, you're jealous you ain't getting this $5, and you're sad without any McDonald's, bad bots.
Well, thank you for the support. And that's something that's always hilarious to me, is that people get pissed off, like bots, it seems, and some random people get pissed off about the support I get for running this channel. And I've seen some goofballs come through and suggest that I should do this for like 100% for free. And that's so dumb, because it's like, do you think, like, I don't know if these people think I live off of air or something, but everyone has to, make some kind of money to survive. That's just the truth of it. And then there's people like, oh, how are you spending it? It's like, what's that to you? It's like, what in the world? But anyways, I thank you so much for the support, and I'm glad that you helped to support this channel and also shove it to the Russian bots, because sometimes they just say goofy stuff that doesn't even make any sense. And so with that, we are on to the next question, but I thank you once again so much for the support. And with that, on to the next one.
And just to make the record clear, we have had I believe the 5th visit from the Cambot. And if you notice my point I was making earlier about it changing its name, see, it changed the middle part of it to tender overpriced. So it snuck its way back in. So that's how the sex bot gets back in. And unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about it. So up next,
I like how you said that's how the sex bot gets back in, like it's a stray dog. You're like, that's how it gets back in.
Yes, it climbs its way back in, unfortunately.
It's like that. It's like that meme from The Simpsons, where the guy's like picking up the drunk guy and throwing him out of the bar, and then he appears behind him in the next frame.
Yeah,
it's kind of like that. Let me see if I can pull up that meme. The Simpsons bar meme. Hopefully I can find the right one. Hopefully it doesn't show anything bad on here. There we go. It's this one. All right. This is the sex bot. We throw it out of the live chat. It's clear out of here. Then it just pops up back in the stream again in the last frame. That's what it's like every single time. And it's so freaking annoying to me, because we're trying to run a professional stream here, and then this thing just keeps on popping up and it's like, yo, you want Tinder? It's like retarded. Anyways, with that, we're going to move on to the next one. And thank you. Oh, wait a minute. Why am I saying thank you? Anyways, we're on to the next question.
All right. And next up, we have a $10 donation from William Allen again, who says, wow, I never thought of Spam and beer. Maybe beer-flavored Spam would be good, or at least a wild turkey.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, William, but I think we're pushing the levels of where spam can go. I think at this point we're just spamming the jokes, which are kind of a little spammy to say the least, and maybe a little bit of trying to be a ham. But I can understand where you're coming from, and I think that beer-flavored turkey, although I'm not really a big fan of the flavor of beer because I have tried it before, and I wasn't a big fan. Of course, it was a small sip, and I was like, ew. And then after that, I never drank it again. But I would say that I would say that if it had to be flavored anything, I don't think the Spam flavor would be good. I think it would be more so the wild turkey. But with that, thank you once again, and I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from Mike P, who says Ukraine donated T1, or actually the UK donated T-150 drones. I wonder how long until they are delivering packages to the Russians.
I wonder if after this war, if Ukraine is going to sell off their surplus R-18s, if they have a surplus of them, to companies like Amazon, and then one of those drones that was used in a war to destroy Russian tanks is delivering Amazon packages to your doorstep. That would actually be really crazy when you think about it, and that's something that happens commonly. Like, they actually have taken apart T-55s for the most part, stripped them down, and actually used them to break up slag at some of the steel and iron mines inside of Russia and Ukraine. So with that, I thank you so much for the support. The pretty good, interesting observation there. It may be a joke, but I kind of think that that is something that should be looked at a little bit. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question. And I thank you once again so much for the support. And with that, on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $2 donation from Mr. Diggs, who says, please place all speeches on website separate.
Sadly, I saw when you put that in, which was during President Zelensky's speech, and we're actually going to run a poll on that here. If people do enjoy President Zelensky's speech here on the stream, I feel like they add a bit and show what the government of Ukraine is thinking and saying for the day, and so I like to include them. Also, we don't really have a site to throw that on. So with that, if we could have a poll run on that real quick, Matthew, I would be greatly appreciative of that, and once you put that poll up, we'll move on to the next question.
All right, and what's the poll on again?
Should Zelensky's speech be included in the streams?
Okay, just a moment.
Take your time. Take your time. Meanwhile, I'm going to sit here and look at this live chat. The spam jokes are a menace. Well, Philip, I mean, like, I like them. That's all I got to say. As over here, Kraken is still kicking. They are. Wild turkey flavor spam. Now there's some homemade MRE. I don't know if I want that one. But with that, Matthew finally put up the poll, and we are on to the next question.
And up next, we have another $20 donation from Fiber Optic, who says Chuck Norris asked the enforcer what was happening in Ukrainian. Then suddenly he donated money and live stream. A real question: do you think the forces will retreat from current positions before being surrounded?
Well, thank you so much for the support, Fiber Optic, and also the joke. It's really cool to know that even Chuck Norris donates on our streams. That used to be a huge joke back in the day. I remember that. A lot of people wore Chuck Norris shirts. But to answer that question, the Ukrainians will withdraw from Severodonetsk before they get encircled. Encirclement is a waste of men and supplies, and so it's much more economical and much more beneficial to retreat those forces intact across the river than keep them in Severodonetsk to be surrounded and then destroyed. I don't think they're being surrounded at the moment. It appears that they have a pretty solid front line spanning from the north to the south of the city, and so I think that will, by and large, if a retreat does occur, it'll be an orderly retreat across the river. And so with that, I hope that answers the question, and of course, I thank you so much for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $2 donation from CA Lags, who says, I wonder how the Switchblades are doing.
I don't really know. We haven't heard anything about them, and I think that by and large, they're useless because of that, because we've seen like one or two, but we haven't seen them actually destroy anything as far as I can recall. So with that, I hope that kind of answers the question, and I thank you once again so much for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, just a quick question for everybody listening. I've seen one or two complaints saying that my mic is a little too loud. I don't know if it's just me maybe getting carried away and getting too loud and close to the mic, or maybe it's my volume's too loud. But if it is too loud, say so in the comments, or otherwise let me know so that way I can change it if necessary. Up next, we have a $10 donation from William Allen again, who says, do you realize the amount of militaria that would be available for collectors after the war? Not just weapons, but I want one of those Ukrainian covers with a trident. Do you collect?
I do collect, actually. Being a reenactor, a large part of that is collecting. And usually I collect firearms, which I don't believe will be coming from Ukraine. We largely ban the imports of firearms from most countries these days. Specifically Russia, which has put a large hindrance on the AK fans here in the United States because they can't get 7.62 by 39 much anymore. But I would really love to get some of the Ukrainian stuff and some of the DPR and LPR stuff, honestly, because their stuff is literally antique and would actually be pretty neat to have because they have like the old Soviet belts and the old shish helmets. But you can really get a shish helmet for like $12 here at CH Cables or something like that. So with that, I thank you so much for the support, William, and I would love, honestly, to get some of the military that will be coming out of this war. A lot of souvenirs for sure. And I think I would like to get some of that stuff, honestly, just to have it. I would really like to have a Ukrainian flag that's been on the front lines, but I'm sure that those things will fetch a very high price and will be highly sought after the war if they're even sold. I'm sure a lot of them will go into museums. And so with that, thank you once again for the support, and I hope that does address the question, William. I hope you have some fun collecting, and I will hopefully be able to collect something after this war as a souvenir. And so with that, we are on to the next question, and I thank you once again for the support.
And up next, we've had a very large $100 donation come in from Michael Tarasi, who says, "Gentlemen, I've been here since day 4, and shout out to the day 4 posse. The quality of your streams has been improving every single night. Your time and efforts are appreciated, and thank you so much. Only Cambot welcome here is a friend of Crow and Tom Servo, MST3K, Slava Ukraine."
Well, I thank you so much for the support, Michael. That kind of support helps us out a great deal. And of course, we're more than appreciative for every bit of support we get from our viewers, especially massive support like that. It's really cool to hear you've been here from day 4. That means you were here since the very first people arrived here on the shores of this channel, which is something unbelievable to me. There was 3 days, y'all, on this stream that no one really watched it. There was like a few, I would get like 3,000 views at most over the entire stream that went on for about the same length as these do now. And no one really watched it a lot, and it was very unprofessional back then. I was still trying to get together the format for this thing. And on day 4, for some reason, the thing blew up, and one of those people who arrived on day 4 was Michael right here. Now, I've hardly seen Michael active in the chats much, but I do know that there is a large amount of people who've been watching this since the very start, and they've used this as their go-to source of news on the war. And to that, I've got to say thank you so much, Michael, for being a trooper, and thank you so much for the support after being here for such a long time. It's impressive to me to think that you've been around here that long, and that you enjoy this channel so much that you're going to support it and help us to keep going. And so I thank you once again. It means a lot to me, and it's really cool to know that we still have Lee Spring Army veterans here in the chat who've been here for 109 days at this point. And so with that, thank you once again, and I hope that does address the question. And with that, we're on to the next one, but I thank you so much once again for the support.
And our final super chat of the night goes to Van Dan Escobar, who puts in a $2 donation and says, "Good day. New War Stash vid dropped today. What are your thoughts?"
I didn't actually see the War Stash vid. I know which guy you're talking about, but I didn't see it, sadly. So unfortunately, I can't really comment on it too much. So I'm sorry, I'm going to have to declare ignorance on that one, but I do thank you so much for the support, and I hate that I couldn't answer the question, honestly. But with that, we've now reached the end of our Super Chats for the night, and we're going to say here we're most likely going to answer live chat questions for the next 10 minutes and get as many of as possible as we can. So with that, on to the first live chat question.
So our first one for the live chat is from Havlin Tuff, who says, "Enforcer, what are the chances that Sweden will give Ukraine the Archer artillery system?"
Let me check. Let me look at that real quick. Archer artillery system, because I don't really think I'm familiar with it. I'm familiar with it. Yeah, I've seen this before. I haven't really focused on this one a lot. It's something that I saw in passing, but I never really read about or learned about anything. How many do they have? That would be the best question. 48. With that in mind, I don't think they'll be giving any, because when the numbers of vehicles get down that low, usually countries prefer to keep these instead of using, just handing them out to other countries. So sadly, I don't think this thing would make it over there. So I hope that answers the question, and we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Pakatang, who says, "Enforcer, will the U.S. government negotiate for U.S. citizens captured by Russia fighting for the Ukrainian military? If the RF is smart, what should they do in this situation?"
I think that it's a very hard thing to answer, because the United States may negotiate for them. They may not. It just depends on the stance that the sitting government in the U.S. is going to take, which is kind of hard to tell right now because there's not really a going trend at the moment. But they may, but then they may not. If the Russian forces wanted to take advantage of the situation, they would run a mock trial, put these guys in prison for life, and then they would try and offer some kind of exchange for either Russians that are being held by the United States or for some kind of a monetary assistance or maybe the lifting of a small sanction. That's most likely the directions I would go for if I had those prisoners, but there's not really much that they can do with them, and if they killed them, that will only cause the United States to get enraged, and we all know what happens when the United States gets enraged. Rash things will happen. So with that, I thank you for the question, and I hope that does answer it, at least in a way. That's really more of my opinion of what would happen and what I would do, but I hope that that was what you were looking for. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Jungle Jim AB9AB, who says, was that a French military officer carrying the French nuclear football for the French president in one of the videos you showed?
Let's go back to that video and see. Macron arrives in Kyiv. La Macron, le Français sont victorieux. The French, by the way, just for people who do not know, actually have a couple of hundred nuclear weapons, and they do have a nuclear football. He is carrying a suitcase. It looks more like a bag. He's carrying 2 backpacks, and I don't... let's pull up the French nuclear football. French nuclear football. Aha. This is the French nuclear football. And this... let's go back. Let's get a good look. Can we get a front view of that thing? Yes, that is the French nuclear football. So I hope that does answer the question, and you are absolutely correct. You have a very sharp set of eyes. I didn't actually know that they had a nuclear football. Well, I knew that they must have had a nuclear football, but I didn't know they had one that looked like that. It almost looks like a backpack. Well, actually, the Americans are carrying that. That's obviously not the French nuclear football. This. No. Wait a minute. Hang on. Is this the American nuclear football? This is the American nuclear football. I would assume that the French one looks the same, I'm guessing. But you have a very sharp set of eyes right there to ask that question, because I didn't actually know that he was carrying bags. So with that, I hope that answers the question, and you pointed out something I had not noticed before. And so with that, we're moving on to the next question, and I thank you so much for pointing that one out. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Woody Stems, who says, are any of those Russian lollipops available as lawn ornaments? How much do they weigh? It could be a money maker for Ukraine. Seriously.
And what lollipops is he talking about?
I have no clue.
Sadly, I don't know which lollipops you're talking about, but if I could, I would say that they'd probably make a decent bit of money. But sadly, I don't know what you're talking about. I hate to say it, but I think that may have been lost in context with the stream and how far it's run. So with that, we're going to move on to the next question. I hate that I can't answer that one. I'm very sorry about that. But with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have another question from Pakatang, who says, Enforcer, is the reason that Germany is so slow to provide lethal military aid is because Germany does not have the public interest, or PM Schultz does not have sufficient authority or political clout?
I don't ever really try and weigh in on the political situation internally in any country, but I can say that there is a large amount of sluggishness in the German government that really can't be accounted for. No one knows why it's happening all too well, but it does seem like there may be a group of Germans in the political sphere, just weighing in on the politics a little bit, that may be trying to stop the Germans from supporting Ukraine in any way, shape, or form due to certain reasons that I really can't go into, because that would be getting into the political situation. So I hope that that does answer the question, at least partially. I know it's a very half answer, but I can't really go into it too well without getting into their internal politics. But with that, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a question from King Mac, who says, Enforcer, per the Pentagon, it's going to be a couple of months before the latest military aid gets into Ukraine. How long can Ukraine stay in the fight in the Donbass since they are outgunned 10-1?
They can stay in the fight a pretty long while. They've been outgunned across the entire country for quite some time, but that doesn't really mean much because while the Russians can outgun the Ukrainians, their lack of training and their to actually coordinate their efforts leads them to pretty much be put on par with their counterparts because there's no way for them to get an actual advantage out of their numbers if they can't coordinate all of those people to do to do a set plan. So in that regard, I think they could hold out for quite some while, and hopefully the support will be over there faster than what they're saying, because it wouldn't make any sense that the first amounts of support arrived within weeks after we declared it, and now the next round of support, which we already know what will be included, will then be over there in several months. So with that, I hope that answers the question, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from William Harris, who says, Enforcer Matt, wars on Earth will go on forever, and they end with one side winning or stopping it with talks. The world should be pushing more for diplomacy and weapons. Also, why no talks?
The talks are not going on anymore because the original talks fell apart multiple times, and the Russians and Ukrainians just decided that talks were pointless, and then they just went on into fighting a war. Diplomacy was never not looked upon seriously during this entire event. There were massive amounts of talks that happened in the months preceding this war all over the world. Most of them occurred in Switzerland, but of course they were between the Ukrainians and Russians, and no agreement was ever reached. I do believe at this point the sword is mightier than the pen. There will be a time in this war, of course, that the pen becomes mightier than the sword, but right now we need to make sure to send over as many weapons as possible because it's vitally important for Ukraine to make sure that they can push the Russians back, since talks that have been going on for months nearly until they fell apart never made it anywhere. The Russians are dead set in what they were wanting at that moment, and hopefully with an extra bit of firepower they can bring the pen back onto the table. And with that, I hope that answers the question, and we're going to answer probably about 2 more and then the stream will end. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And real quick here, it looks like that poll that we ran about Zelensky's speech being included on the stream ended in an overwhelming majority of you saying that yes, we should include it on the stream, so it is settled. And also, one more note, Enforcer, when Woody Stems was referring to Russian lollipops, he was referring to tank turrets.
Oh, they could make a lot of money selling those, specifically to countries like the United States, because they could learn a lot from them. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question that time, and I'm sorry I didn't catch on it. I was just at... I think the moment that would have been brought up when you asked that question, it was long enough ago that it like slipped out of my mind. But with that, I hope that does answer the question finally. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And it looks like this is probably going to be our last one tonight. It doesn't look like we have any more live chat questions in the spreadsheet. So it looks like the last one goes to Duncan VR, who says, our Australian Prime Minister personally invited to Ukraine. Do you think he'll go?
I don't really know a lot about the Australian Prime Minister in particular. I don't know much about his character, his personality, or anything like that. But I've seen a large amount of political figures from all around the world making their way to Ukraine, and I think that he would most likely head there as well, because that's pretty much what everyone's doing at this point. That's been heavily supporting Ukraine to show that they physically support the country to the point that they would go there and actually show it in person. So in that regard, not knowing anything about the man's character, if it even is a man, let's pull that up. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. That's a man. So I think he would probably go there, not knowing really anything about him. And so with that, I hope I've answered that question, and we've reached the end of tonight's stream on day 113. It's once again been a great honor for me to report the news, and I hope you have all enjoyed it as well. I thank you all so much once again for the support, and also for enjoying these streams, because it means a lot to me that a lot of people do get on here every single day, and they count this as their primary source of the war. I'm humbled and honored to think that people do think that, and I will make sure to keep on continuing to deliver this news, and keep on letting y'all know about what's going on in the war in Ukraine. Thank you all once again for watching, and if you are new to this channel, please make sure to subscribe. We do run these streams every single day of the week, except for Mondays at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, where we cover the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine, and we also upload daily summaries giving a quick highlight of the major events that had happened in the day that were recorded on film. And so with that, I thank you all once again for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow on Friday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the War of Ukraine on day 114. I thank you all so much for watching once again, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Good night, and take care.